For this year's end retrospective, I'd like to try something a little different. In the past, I've done long-form talks, short-form recommendations, and an essay mixtape to sum up quieter years. 2021 has been anything but, as over the past 12 months I've created 24 videos and an entire season of a podcast just over 20 hours in length. There's very little for me to surmise, because almost all the subjects I would have talked about in a year's end list I already did. But this festive retrospection made me consider that none of these projects would have been possible if not for this year's defining feature: collaboration. My favourite project in video of 2021 was a huge team effort, Another Minute Remaining, that saw nearly 60 video makers producing 60 minutes of 60-second videos. Quest and Show is defined by a new guest coming in every session to go on an adventure, and I've had the fortune of running games for both experienced players and newcomers to role-playing, as well as for people I've known for years and complete strangers that I've since befriended. Then there's been the videos that wouldn't have left the ground if not for those I could bounce ideas off, who proofread my work, or provided additional VO and video. I've been very fortunate that over the past 5 years I've been able to make friends with talented creatives whose own passion and projects inspire my own. For that reason, I'd like to return the favour by letting them be the stars of this year's end retrospective. This video is a series of interviews with those who have had the biggest effects on my work the past year and beyond. Some names you'll likely recognise, and a few I hope you check out following this. What were their games of the year? What did they think of the past 12 months? And what are they looking forward to most in the coming year? This is 2021 in Conversation.
I'm Mitch Kramer, otherwise known as HeavyEyed on YouTube, and I make gaming videos about games and why we play them. My game of the year is Unsighted by the Brazilian studio Pixelpunk. So Unsighted is a 2D pixel art, Metroidvania, 2D Zelda-like-ish. It's kind of an amalgamation of a lot of different ideas thrown together. And it's also a gay robot love story. So Unsighted took the basic ideas of, exploring and combat and just added a bunch of little things that really make it its own. So there's a permanent countdown timer that when it runs out, your game save file is deleted permanently. It has a huge emphasis on speedrunning, so pretty much any section of the game can be sequence broken if you know how to do it. It has just some of the most fluid and tight combat I've seen. It takes the idea of like a 2D Zelda game and gives it really interesting combat rather than swing and block. So if you're in a tight combat situation, you have the ability to parry. If you can time, it's a pretty tight timing window, but once you get it down, it's very satisfying. And that will knock an enemy back and give you the option to critical hit it, doing a lot more damage. You also have a gun, just to keep distance, and there's a bunch of other smaller items you get. So they added the Twilight Princess spin top weapon thing. Not only that, but say in a Zelda game, the enemies might attack you one at a time. This, it takes and I hate to say it, Dark Souls approach, where enemies just attack you. There's no order. You just have to be on top of everything and be paying attention at all times. I was definitely feeding off the adrenaline while playing it. Just getting super hyped up. And I would say it's about a 7-hour game, and I have spent about 35 hours in it. I just couldn't put it down once I realized the amount of things that you can do, and I just wanted to try everything I could. When you start the game, it gives you your objective straight away. It's like you need to go to these 5 places and get these 5 things. You can do them in any order you like, but it gives you a very clear order to follow. And I think so it functions a lot like a Zelda game, but then you get the items to progress further, more akin to a Metroid game. There's a lot of puzzle solving involved, like, very Zelda-like puzzle solving, and just a lot of really fun combat. So if exploration isn't your thing, there is still plenty to dig into. You can, follow this linear path, or you can figure out, if you want, how to break it open, because it is intended to be sequence broken so hard that you can beat the game incredibly quickly. Queer media in general, especially in games, I've found is either on a scale of bad to just missing the mark. But the thing with Unsighted, it puts itself in a position that not many other games can, where it's made by 2 trans women. It definitely came from 2 people who just made something without really worrying or thinking about how it would be received. It's just, you can tell there's just a lot of love and passion put into it, both in the story and mechanically. Like it doesn't hold back at any level of the game. It doesn't hold back.
How did you find out about Unsighted?
So funnily enough, one of the developers, we're mutuals on Twitter and have been for a couple of years. And one day, out of the blue, she just DMs me and is like, "Hey, we're releasing this game next week. Would you want to play it? You don't have to make a video on it. You don't have to do anything. I just think you would enjoy this, so here's a code for you." And I played it. I loved the shit out of it, and then just immediately decided I want to talk about it a lot. I didn't really have any expectations going in, other than this was an incredible looking game. And I got a quick elevator pitch in the DM that it was a Metroidvania that's time-based. So my only thing was looking out for how that worked. But, it's been quite a few years of banger after banger Metroidvanias. So I was kind of curious to see how it stood next to some of the big ones that we've seen recently, like Hollow Knight, Axiom Verge, etc. So, but, it lived up and exceeded the expectation of what I thought a Metroidvania could be. There's so much opportunity for experimentation that it also is co-op. It's local co-op, but you can use the Steam thing to play online. And through that, I actually managed to find a lot of weird exploits that were intended, but I never would have thought about unless I was just messing around in Discord with someone. Like bouncing ideas off of each other, being like, what if this works? What if that works? What if we try this? Sort of things.
Do you have a good example of one of those?
Yes. I mentioned earlier there's the Twilight Princess Beyblade thing. If you time it right, you can jump on it. And if you time it right, you can jump across water indefinitely. Like, you can just keep skimming across the water. But it's a very tight frame window to get it down. So maybe the first couple times you try it, you'll fail, but you can basically rock skim across water, which is very interesting because water is one of the progression blocks in the game. Something that's too rigid mechanically, for me personally, is a bit boring. So if I get to experiment with systems outside of what's presented, I'm going to have way more fun. It's one of those games where I think the less you know, the better, but it has, if you look at it, it has a lot deeper of a combat system than you will think it does. So if you're interested in deep combat games, then this is the one.
Yeah, I was about to say, can you sit on the sofa?
You can't, but I can. Hold on.
Okay, let's check it.
All right, I'm going to line up my actual real-life office couch with... Yeah, I'm glad you asked. Okay, so hold on, wait, if I go here... No, wrong side. I need to be on this side. Okay, so my couch is right here. My armrest is right here. So everything looks good to me. So yeah, I'm just gonna turn around.
Oh, he's just clipping through the sofa.
But like to me, it looks good. Like my armrest is where it should be. The edge is where it should be, and it just kind of, like no joke. This is like typically like where I'll sit. Like when we've been playing with people, it's just like I'll hang out in the lobby and I'll just like pop a seat on my actual couch, but line it up here, and it's like kind of nice. I'm LambHoot. People would know me best for, unfortunately, probably some SpongeBob videos I made under the influence of youth. And yeah, I mean, now these days I make a lot of, I mean, as you can probably tell, VR-related videos. And I hang out and I hunt a lot of ghosts and I have a good time. Yeah, my game of the year is probably the game we're currently in, which is Phasmophobia. It's a neat little indie horror game that I think came out like 2 years ago at this point. And yeah, but not exactly like for the, like, I mean, it is a really, really good game and I've enjoyed it, but like, honestly, one of the big reasons is just straight up like this room that we've sadly made a horrible mess of, but yeah, no, the trick here is if you fill it with like enough paint cans and then you try to grab a paint can like at the bottom, it'll collide with like all of them and they just like explode if you get it right. Okay, these are the last paint cans. Okay. All right, here we go. And I'll just try to grab this green one in the bottom. Yes! This is so great. Well, I think like part of it obviously is that like I think when it first came out, it was kind of like one of those like, you know, like weird indie horror games. Everybody starts playing it like Slender Man or something. Obviously, like it had something extra to it, which is that like all the levels are randomized and the ghosts are randomized, and there's like a lot of replay value. But I think like obviously what kept it going is that it's just continuously been updated the entire time. I mean, like even this lobby didn't used to look at all like it used to, which is really, really cool. So yeah, like I think just the fact that like it's been supported and like there've been like multiple versions of it kind of come out and continuous updates to the ghosts and to the gameplay and all that, that's definitely like kept it alive. But I think the other thing is that like it's a horror game not like many others. Like it's like, you know, it's a multiplayer 4-player, you know, thing, and it like having partners doesn't necessarily like take away from the stress or take away from the horror like it would in like, I don't know, like Resident Evil when you got like 2 players in Resi 6 and like it's not really scary anymore. It's like, because like it's not like you don't fight with the ghosts in like a traditional sense, and I think that's what's appealing too, is that like people who like have played like a lot of traditional games get really, really into this, because like if you've watched like a ghost hunting show, you immediately get the point. And it's the fact that it's a lot more like an escape room than like a normal video game. I think that's the big draw, is like you don't go in there and like beat a level. You go in there and you like solve a mystery. You use a bunch of tools and you like point cameras in different directions and you like solve a mystery and then you get out. So it's like it's like a little detective game that's like super accessible, super appealing to a lot of people, has a fantastic aesthetic. And then it has this great lobby where after the match you can kind of like just reconvene with your teammates and like go over what you just went through, which is really, really cool. A lot like a real escape room, I think. Because that's the thing, it's a lot like, it captures that moment of like, after you've been to like laser tag or something, where you go in with like a bunch of friends for your birthday, you go into laser tag, it's a dark room, you all get separated, you play laser tag for like 20 minutes, and then you all exit, you follow, you know, the little green lines on the floor, you come out, and then you see all your friends again in the light, and then you like go over what you all did. Like you have that moment with your friends, like, oh, I got separated, I took out like 5 guys. Like you have that moment where you come out, you're like, yo, when I was lost from you, the ghost passed right in front of me and I locked my son and I survived. And like you have like all those moments where you catch up with each other. You also like, you learn more about the game at the same time, but you do it in like a really easy conversational way, which I think is like obviously aided by the fact that like the game requires voice chat for some of its mechanics, and I think what that leads to is like a player base that even when you're playing with random people, everybody's like super talkative, everybody's like super ready to just like engage, because like I feel like a game where like you have to talk to the ghost and like also your other players or your other teammates means that like you don't get like a lot of shit disturbers. Like you tend to like get people who like just want to get through it and like are generally friendly and like aren't like people who want to like hide behind a keyboard and like troll people. Like it's like a really like chill, friendly time, even with like absolutely random people.
How much do you think the VR side of it contributes to that?
I think it for me, like I was saying before, like for me it's more just that like I know the game kind of has like really bad controls, so I tend to just enjoy the point and clickiness of just using, you know, controllers. But I think it definitely I don't know how much it matters, because I very rarely have played with like a random person who was in VR. Whenever I played with like other people who've been in VR, it's always been like people I personally knew, and otherwise, like if I go for randoms, it's always like desktop users, and that's fine. But it's, you know what? This is not the answer you expect. The VR plays into the teamwork because there are certain things that VR players can do that other players can't. For example, most players have 3 inventory slots. VR players have 2 inventory slots, but we technically have 2 hands we can hold things with. It means you like forfeit things, like you can't like open doors if your hands are completely full. But it tends to be that like you'll be playing with like non-VR people, and they'll be like, "Oh, you're the VR guy? Okay, you're the camera mule because you can hold 2 cameras at once. Nobody else can." But it makes sense because like otherwise 2 people would have to hold cameras. Now 1 person can hold 2 cameras, and those 2 other people can hold different things, and you basically like have optimized the flow of like getting tools into the house, and it kind of like plays into the whole thing. Like, oh, you're in VR? Okay, you're like, yes, you're different than everybody else. You're interacting with the game in a different way, but also like you like that doesn't mean that we're not affected by that, because they benefit from the fact that I'm in VR at the same time. So it's like there's like a teamwork aspect to like this medium too, which is really, really interesting. I've definitely had moments. My scariest moment in any game I think I've ever played happened in this game, but I don't know if I can talk about it.
Okay.
It's very inappropriate.
Oh, okay, understandable.
It's up. Okay, it's up to you. I have a good lobby story, but one time shortly after the game had been updated, I joined a random lobby. I was playing with Zach. Zach, 2 other randoms, but then Zach's internet cut off, and then he decided to just end and like go to bed anyway, so it was like whatever. So I was gonna complete a round with these 2 other guys. It was right after an update, and like clearly there was some sort of exploit in this update.
Okay.
And one of the items in the game is a Ouija board. You don't always find it, but sometimes you can find it in the house, and if you find the Ouija board, you can ask it direct questions like, "Where are you?" or something, and then the Ouija board will spell out like the letters of like exactly what room the ghost is in, so you can skip a lot of the busy work if you find it.
Awesome.
Except so Zach drops off. I'm playing, Zach drops off. I didn't really notice Zach dropped off yet, and then I get like a radio call from one of the people who's playing, who's like a squeaker, and he just goes like, "The ghost is racist, copy," and I'm like, "What?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about? Like, shut up!" And then he goes, no, the ghost is racist. You have to come to the Ouija board now. And it turned out, we found out later that the other player was like hacking the game and like doing all sorts of, we found out later he was like manipulating the ghost. So like he was definitely responsible for this. But anyways, so the little kid takes me to the Ouija board that he finds in the attic. And he's like, "Look at this. It said the N-word." And I'm like, "No, shut the fuck up." So we turn on the Ouija board. I'm like, "Where are you?" And I've done this like a million times. I've seen like, normally it's like kitchen, basement, bedroom, something like that. And I watch as the little like thing goes to N-I, and then I'm like,
No.
I was so scared. I was like, the game is straight up haunted now. I guess like that's the thing, is like the experiences you have in this game are so. They're a lot, like they are very memorable. I mean, that's just like one example, but I've had moments where like we're just playing with other people, and like I remember, like I tend to remember a lot like the moments of like playing with someone for the first time, like one of my friends or something. Like I think I've introduced this game to like a couple of my friends, like Sean and Chariot Rider and Matt, and then they like later introduced it to other people. I know some of them played with Jared, and now Jared plays it, but I've never played with him, which is interesting.
Yeah.
But it's like I've had that experience of like remembering the first time I played, having like some of my old high school friends like show me like the ropes, and then like passing that on to other people. I think that's like a memory I'm really fond of, is like like identifying to people at the start of round, like, okay, these are what all the items are. This is what we're gonna do, and like kind of like gearing them up for what we're about to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. And then just kind of like coming out of it afterwards and just like sitting in this lobby for like straight up hours, just like chatting with people. Even like once we've all agreed we're done playing the game, but we're all like free to keep like chatting, just like sitting back here and like watching people talk about like what they're doing in school, or I mean, as it tended to be, like we were in the middle of the pandemic a lot of the time we were playing this, so just like catching up with people and like what was going on in their part of the world, and you know how things were going for them or their city or whatever was happening. But yeah, it's weird. Like this lobby was like where I kind of decompressed after the ghost hunts, but also just like got like life updates from like so many people.
Yeah.
I was playing with Sean and Alex, Hyperion and Chariot Rider. I was sitting in the couch. Yeah, and they were like chatting about something, and they kept like talking about stuff, and I kept like, I was just kind of sitting. They were like kind of over there playing with the basketball, chatting. I was sitting, and I was like, you know, I was responding every once in a while. They would say something like, oh, that's a lot like such and such a game, whatever, and they were never like responding to me, and I thought they were being rude to me until like I figured out like fully like 15 minutes into this conversation that like the game stopped picking up my mic.
Oh no.
And then we had a great moment that I still remember, like right here, of like trying to communicate to them that I wanted to, like I was gonna go to bed, and like using there to like spell letters.
To try and spell.
And like I remember like go to bed or something. Like I remember like doing like a solid like something like this. Yeah. But yeah, just like doing this and like getting them to approve the letter, and then like giving them like a thumbs up or like a no or whatever. And that's the thing, yeah, because like you'll join a lot of lobbies, and like I tend to like, especially if I'm playing with random people, I'll try to like make sure everybody has a mic before we play.
Yeah.
But even if they don't, like as long as they know how to like, even if they're in desktop, like as long as they can like swivel left and right for no, or like up and down for yes, and like as long as they can confirm they understand us and like can hear us, we can still like give that person tasks. They can't necessarily communicate if like they're alone in the room and something freaky happens. They can't tell us what happened in case it was important, but we know that, and we kind of like, we're in the same way that like I'll go in, people will be like, oh, you're the VR guy, you're the VR mule. You'll see a person who doesn't have a mic and be like, okay, you're gonna have like different tasks, but like that's fine, like we're just gonna work around it.
Yeah.
And it's neat. It's a game that like has communication at its core, and there are many different ways to communicate in it, and I love that. It's cool too. There's like a whole mechanic in the game of like, if you get killed by the ghost, you then become a ghost too.
Oh, okay.
And you can kind of like just fuck off, or you can kind of like haunt people. Like you can, if my left hand wasn't disconnected, yeah, you can like, if like let's say I were a ghost right now and you weren't, you would see like these paint cans floating basically, and you can kind of like poltergeist your way around. But you can use this to like help your remaining teammates.
Yeah.
So like typically you'll use like vertical for like affirmative and like horizontal for no, and you'll like communicate with people, and they'll be like, oh, can you because like let's say like if you've been killed, the ghost is probably super dangerous, and they'll be like, oh, can you go into the house, check the book, if it has writing, come back and tell us, like affirmative. Or like sometimes they'll even show you like, oh, we have a camera set up in the house, can you go in front of the camera and wave your things around if you see like such and such an activity of the ghost. And like you can like send like people who are completely mute, like you can't hear them, but you can see their motion,
yeah.
And you can still like collaborate and like do teamwork with them in a weird way. It's a lot of fun to like be super scared because a ghost has killed like all your teammates, but then seeing like Zach's body language as he goes into like, damn it, or like seeing like a friend, like the body language of one of your friends as they like go into a house, and like you watching them from like this grainy little camera safely like outside in a little truck, and like watching your friend who's dead just like shake a teddy bear around and like tell you that like something's been done or something. It's a lot of fun.
I don't know, is there anything I haven't asked you about which you want to like mention about it that you think is like cool about it?
I mean, like I think the randomization is I think like that's the coolest thing about it.
Oh,
I think that might be like,
I didn't even know it had. So explain that. So what is it?
Well, so I mean, the randomization is just that like every it's kind of like roguelike-y. I guess like every level has every level is randomly selected. Every level has a random ghost, and like the things that the ghost will do that like you have to like observe as like evidence to find out which kind of ghost it is are always randomized. So and then different ghosts have different behavior. So it's cool that like every single time you go in, it's not like cookie cutter. It's not, the homes are very, very similar, but like the things that will happen there are always going to be completely random. The difficulty of the ghost and like the behavior that it'll have, it's a lot of it is like based on the players too. Like depending on how like rowdy you are, the ghost will react differently. So it's like there's a lot of like random noise in the game that like makes it like infinitely replayable, but in a way that like is also like based on the play. Like you are kind of like the seed that randomizes the ghost, because when you walk in there and you start talking with your friends and the ghost listens to your mic and like listens to words you're saying and tries to identify things and like trigger ghost events to like fuck with you, it really like it makes you feel like you're having a unique experience with that ghost and with your team, because like if anybody else walked into the same house with the same ghost that you did, the ghost would behave differently, because like they're not doing exactly what you're doing. They're not doing the same things in the same places as you. And it's just like, I don't know, it's crazy to think about that. Like you walk in there and you have to catch a ghost, but like you're also like directly influencing the ghost. It's almost like one of those like Mario situations where you're like the little Mario and then there's the shadow Mario walking behind you and he's like mimicking exactly what you're doing. But it's not exactly the same, but it's definitely like the ghost is like personalized, which is super weird. I compared it to like to an escape room before, and it's exactly like when you do something in the escape room and the host of the escape room like is watching you and hears you through a microphone and then like triggers an event specifically to mess with you.
Oh, brilliant.
Except it's all artificial intelligence. So it's like they've automated that feeling of having like a, not like a chaperoned experience, but an experience that's like guided by an entertainer or like someone at like a spooky haunted house who's gonna like pop out and scare you once you come out and say a certain keyword or you turn like a certain alley, and like there's a lot of like moments of like events that occur that are like tied to your behavior, and that's like mind-boggling.
I guess kind of speaking a bit more broadly then about like just 2021 in general, like how does Phasmophobia kind of fit in that? Like, because I know that, as you said kind of at the beginning, like VR is something you're getting like really into. So like this year in general, do you think that like VR stuff is just like it's getting better with every new game almost?
I guess. Well, because that's the thing, is this was never intended as like a VR exclusive, because it's very much like a desktop game also. I think the VR stuff was like a second, like not an afterthought, but it was a second priority. But they definitely have like supported it, which is really cool. So it does like, feels like a VR game, even though it's not built from the ground up for VR. But as far as like 2021 goes, I think like even though it's not a VR game, this is exactly the kind of stuff we need in VR, because it's like the biggest problem with VR is like obviously the fact that it is so freaking expensive, and also there are so many barriers to entry. There's the cost, there's the nausea, there's the sickness, there's once you like get past that expensive barrier, you still have to like build up your belly strength to be able to play this for like longer than 20 minutes. And so the big problem with that is that like it's hard to like have friends who also have VR. And I think this solves that problem by just being like, hey, this is cross-platform. You can play in VR, you can play outside of VR, but you can all play together. You're not separated by platform. I mean, some VR platforms will do like, if you buy out a game on Oculus, you can only play with other people who are on the Oculus platform, which is garbage. This is just like, no, you can play this in VR, you can have a great time, but you can also introduce this to friends of yours who have it in desktop, or you can join a lobby full of desktop players, and you're not going to just be constantly recycling the same people you've already met as you do in like a lot of other VR multiplayer games where you start to like see the regulars. But it's I think like this is exactly what we need, because it's a really, really good game in or out of VR, but it gives you that option, and you do get a little bit more from it, but you still have like a role to play on the rest of the team. It's not like you're having like necessarily a better experience, you're just having a different experience than everyone else, but it lets everyone play together, which is like fantastic. Like I think there's a lot of opportunity here for like using voice recognition to like skip menus in VR by just like giving commands, like a game where you have like, I don't know, like a little robot companion and you can just tell it like attack, halt, whatever. Like I think like this technology is a great way to like alleviate some of the awkwardness of like being in the middle of a combat game or being in the middle of an action game or doing something where you're like in the heat of the moment, you need to do something quick, and then you have to open this big menu that pops up in front of your face and it's super clunky and super garbage.
Yeah, if you were doing like military training, I mean, you would want to teach people like pull out your radio and say, you know, Tango's in the building, you know, east 235 or something like that, and like that's how you get that communication across, not from highlighting,
exactly,
and stuff like that.
Yeah, you don't want to like pull out a thing and like trace a line on it or do like you like it'd be cooler, if you had like these context sensitive inputs of like doing something and triggering it like some extra behavior with your voice. I think like there's a lot of opportunity there. Not so many people are doing it, but you know, I think like if this game is an example, like there are ways to like not gamify your voice, but like to use the fact that like you might need to speak in a certain game, use that like the very like rich content that is like your voice and the words that you're saying to do things behind the scenes that you're not fully aware of, but like are definitely having like a tangible impact on the game.
It's a brand new input that like a lot of people don't use outside of, I mean, like Nintendo was always the classic example of blow into the microphone to like knock Goombas over, which it's simple enough, but there's way more that can be done with a human voice.
The ghost will listen to anything you say, so sometimes it'll pick up on something for like the wrong reason, and then it kind of builds this like meta narrative within the game where like I've had moments where some like we're trying to get the ghost to respond, it's not responding to us at all, and then some guys just like as a joke is like, "Hey ghost, we're here about your car's extended warranty," and then suddenly the ghost like flickers the lights and we're like, "Oh shit, we're onto something," and then we start like pulling on that thread, and for whatever reason, just by randomness, it works, and it's just fantastic. I've had ones where I had one time where we couldn't get the ghost to do anything. I'm like, "Ghost, where is the money?" And then like it immediately appeared and walked up the stairs. I'm like, we got our first clue.
He wants money.
I remember too. There's a bit now that people have noticed that if you ask the ghost if it's French, it misinterprets that as something. So that's one of the things speedrunners will do. They'll like run through a house and be like, "Are you French? Are you French?"
Oh, that's so funny.
It's so great. Yeah, it's like you have to trigger the ghost. You have to like offend it in a horrible way and be like, "Okay, where are your weak spots? What kind of subjects do we have to broach here to get you to do something?"
Why are you dead? Was it because you owed car insurance? Was it because you're French?
And I'm kind of realizing too, that's kind of like the whole bit in this game, which is that like it's like where is the ghost? What room are they in? What kind of ghost are they? And then there's like side objectives sometimes, and like what else can you make it do, or like what has it done? And then once you figure that out, you get the hell out of there. So it's like I think there's like a really cool appeal there to horror that's not just like scare you horror, but it's like something about a ghost or something about a murder or an event that you have to like slowly uncover, but it's not like you're not in immediate danger, which is cool.
But, unless you have anything to add, I think that's
cool. Yeah, no, I guess I'm good. Yeah, no, I think I've captured why I like this game so much.
Right.
My name's Liam. I go by LiamTriforce on YouTube and pretty much everything else. Most people would know me for my videos on either Zelda or Half-Life or Valve games. Mainly I like to do long-form retrospectives on all the stuff that I loved growing up and as an adult. My favorite game of the year thus far is one of my favorite fighting games, is Guilty Gear Strive. I did not expect to like this game as much as I did, but I absolutely fell in love with it from the moment you turn it on. My brother loaded it up on his computer on release day, and I heard the music from like across the room. Soul's theme has like these insane guitar riffs that they're so catchy, and then the vocals come in and it's like, what is that spicy banger? And I walk into my brother's room and he's playing this intro and he's like, "This is Guilty Gear Strive." And I pick up the controller and he shows me the intro and I'm like, I'm going to buy this. As soon as you turn it on, it just takes you into like this tutorial, right? And it's just Soul Bad Guy versus Kai Kisk. As soon as you beat that tutorial, which just kind of lets you move around, it teaches you the basics of a fighting game. But as soon as you just like beat up Kai a little bit and beat the tutorial, you're taken to the main menu, and then you can just do whatever you want. Like, the story mode isn't the focus, it's basically just playing matches. As we move more towards, you know, games being online and whatnot, I know fighting games have moved toward that, but Guilty Gear really leans heavily on the experience with other players and just playing a fighting game. Well, my previous experience with fighting games of this ilk was probably mostly with either Dragon Ball FighterZ or Persona 4 Arena. Persona 4 Arena and Guilty Gear Strive share so much of their DNA. Mechanically, they're very similar, and that is probably what helped. But other than that, I've never been great at fighting games. I honestly kind of suck at them. I have problems with missing inputs, double inputs, timing, shit like that. I can't do it. But my brother is excellent at them. He tries to get me into them sometimes. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Guilty Gear Strive was the first time where I was like, this is awesome. I think it's just because every single minute detail in Strive is accessible. The game has cancels in it. They're called Roman cancels in Guilty Gear Strive, right? And you just tap the Roman cancel command during a combo, and you can do it at pretty much any time, and there are different kinds of Roman cancels. But the thing about them is that they slow down time for a very brief period when you use them, and they take 1 bar. But from there, you can just create your own combos. It's so easy to just do anything you want after a Roman cancel. And because of that window, it's really fun to experiment, and it adds a lot of depth, but it's also very clear to the player what you're supposed to do to cancel and what you can do afterward, because the moves in the game are very clear to the player as well. And just when it comes to strings, even without cancels, you can just kind of tap buttons and figure out your own strings, and it's very easy to learn. And the other very helpful thing about Strive is that they show you how easy each character is to learn by the star rating next to their names. So the easiest character is Kai, according to the game, and the hardest character is Zato. It's really great how good they are at communicating everything to the player, and I have no doubt that, also considering this is one of the most successful fighting game launches, like other than Smash, obviously, this is a really great gateway fighting game. I think it's pretty effective to go in with zero expectations, because it is everything about the past 20 or 30 years of fighting games refined into such a complete and like masterful package, and it presents itself immediately with like that compelling intro. And if you've never played a fighting game before, the intro is so perfect and so, in your face and, catchy and enticing with the music and the voice acting and everything, that you're probably going to want to play more of it. It's like I guess a board game where you're learning the rules the first time you play, and then when it clicks after the game is over, you're like, oh, I want to play that again now.
Has playing Strive given you maybe an interest in going back and trying the previous Guilty Gear games?
Yes, I managed to get like Guilty Gear Exard for I don't know how much, but I definitely wanted to play Exard because there are things that they did that appeal more to enthusiast people that play fighting games, or people that have been playing for a long time. It's not too difficult to learn, but it's in that era of like Persona 4 Arena where it was like, yeah, they're not difficult to learn, but they're also very difficult to master. Strive, mastering it, if you're like me and you suck at fighting games, you can totally master it. And so yeah, I got really curious about it, and I'll play that someday. Don't have time though. My brother was playing a DLC character named Gold Lewis Dickinson. He's a Area 51 worker with a giant coffin, and this dude is a piece of shit. I hate fighting him. He has a lot of range and does a fuckload of damage, and it's so hard to deal with him. But the counter to that is that he's very slow, and I don't think he can dash. So there are punishable traits to that character, and because he's so slow and big, you can hit him from a distance pretty easily. And this is where my one of my favorite characters in the game, Axel Lowe, comes in. He's basically like, I guess, Ivy from Soul Calibur in 2D, because he can straight up just hit people from across the screen with his scythe. And not only that, but his character is amazing. I love the whole concept and everything. I won't spoil it if you've never played the game. But basically, he has scythes that reach across the screen. You can do cool strings with the range that you have. And there are really great defensive options with him. And I totally exploited the fact that Gold Lewis was slow and had, no speed, and he was big. He was an easy target. So I kept... my brother was being an asshole. I switched to Axel, and I started beating the shit out of him with my scythes, and he couldn't come near me. And I just went, "Gotta work on your zoning," over and over and over again. And he got so pissed off. It was so funny. But both of us were laughing, and we I think we both acknowledge that as some of the most fun we've had with the game. It's just that despite the fact that I was able to exploit that one or two those little weaknesses in Gold Lewis's kit, it was so memorable, and it gave me a new appreciation for a character that I was just kind of messing around with. And then I actually started playing him in ranked. But I feel like Strive was a totally new experience for me. It was something that I didn't really commit a lot of time to usually. And I think it definitely summed up a lot of what I've been trying to do this year. Is, well, I don't think I really need to talk much about the state of everything.
Sure.
Everyone has been feeling it. And one of the things I learned, because I went on break earlier this year, is I needed to diversify everything. And that was something that I need to find new hobbies and habits and just build a healthier lifestyle. And Strive came at the perfect time too, because it was right as I was taking a break. And Strive was different because it wasn't what I would usually play at all. But it also allowed me to connect a bit more, not only with my brother, but also with his friends that also play it. And I got closer to them through this game. And that's something that I really appreciate about multiplayer games, is that if you have something like Team Fortress 2, and now with Strive, is that there's a lot you can assume you have in common just by playing the games together. And, if maybe you're working on the same team or you're against each other and you're learning from each other as you fight, it was very helpful to have something that helped me connect and learn. I really appreciate Strive for that.
My name is JacobGeller. I make video essays on YouTube. The people at home probably know me from, I don't know, a video about people looking for stuff in Shadow of the Colossus, or a video about how Mario Galaxy is actually very sad, or a video about caves. Taking emotions into video games. That's my brand. So the game that I want to talk about is a kind of a trick for a couple reasons, because it's not necessarily my game of the year, and it's also hard to make the argument that it came out this year. But Pistol Whip, the VR shoot 'em up rhythm game, released a song expansion pack this year called Smoke and Thunder, and it is on a kind of like base level, I think the most fun I had playing a video game this year. So they've done a couple of these, and the first couple DLCs they had, everything has been free up to this point also, which is great. But they've done a couple that were just purely more songs, that were more tracks, and these were kind of the, just like, what if there was more Pistol Whip, kind of like the original game was. And those were fine. And then they released a kind of sci-fi themed one that had an overarching story and was more thematically consistent throughout, where it was like the story about a guy who crashed on Mars or something fighting robots. And that was really interesting, and I like that one a lot. And they just released this one, which is a series of songs, and they are all Western themed. And so it's like kind of old West songs or something, the songs are modern, but it's got a kind of Western vibe. And then it kind of segues in the middle into staying Western, but being like a kind of wild, wild West sci-fi Western vibe.
Ooh.
And it's just a series of probably like 5 songs or whatever, and they're simply all bangers. They just released like 5 excellent tracks that when played together are kind of like this story of being out in the West. It's interesting how simple Pistol Whip is as a game, where it is truly just you've got a pistol and you shoot guys in time with music, and like that's all it is. And so then adding even very small changes to that formula, because it's so simple, makes it feel like really different. And so, you know, at the beginning of this, one of the interesting things they do is now the levels are designed for dual wielding. So instead of having your one pistol with like 22 rounds in it or whatever, you have 2 6-shooters. And so you're kind of like walking into the saloon with your 2 revolvers in a very Western sense, and having 2 guns with 6 bullets instead of 1 gun with 20 bullets means that you're also having to think about your reloads more often. And so you're kind of having to, like, if they just gave you 2 very strong pistols, you would be completely overpowered. But because they give you 2 and they make them weaker, then you have to kind of think about the game in a totally different way than you were before. And then later, they go even farther, where your 2 6-shooters are replaced with 2 kind of, like, explosive sawed-off shotguns, and so you only have 2 shots with each hand before you have to reload. And so they're, like, they've kept the kind of all of the controls the same, but by just changing these things in the game, they've made it into a really different and much more kind of fast-paced and frenetic experience. The other thing that I like about it is just that, like, I'm fine with electro music, but it is not super exciting to me. But having these kind of more spaghetti western sounding tracks, again, give the game a very different vibe while not changing anything about its core gameplay. And so I think I just really like how much they've been able to change the feel of the game while maintaining, you know, everything that they proved they already knew how to do with it. It feels like Pistol Whip 2. You know, this is the kind of things that I feel like you would see a developer do with a sequel, where they figured out the core gameplay in the original, and then they get to just throw a bunch of twists on that gameplay in the sequel. And what is so cool about this is they've kept it all in one package, and they're like, you bought it, we're just going to keep giving you this stuff. And, you know, for me, who has, you know, can basically go through all of the levels on hard without too much difficulty, it's also kind of like, it means that I have to relearn some skills that I haven't just like perfected the levels the way that I have the original ones. You should certainly play the original levels of Pistol Whip first, because a lot of the things that this DLC changes are hard to appreciate unless you have kind of a grounding in the original game. And something that I really love about it, but also something that it does require a warning, is it's incredibly physically strenuous. You know, that I played all of these levels in a row and had a blast, but was absolutely exhausted by the end, because the movement of Pistol Whip is kind of just doing squats repeatedly to, like, you know, you're avoiding bullets being shot at you and whatever, and so you're just hopping up and down and crouching to avoid things and whatever. And so it's like, it is really a workout to do this sort of thing. And that also means, of course, that you look absolutely ridiculous while you're playing it. But I think anyone who's got VR is familiar enough with that experience already.
I'm going to ask a stupid question, and it's up to you if you want to answer it or not. How do you feel that this DLC fits within the great pantheon of cowboy games such as Red Dead Redemption 2? Do you think it improves on what Rockstar set the page with there, or do you think it's a good complement to that?
I think it's, you know, it's certainly a very different genre of cowboy than Red Dead Redemption 2. But I feel like it is, you know, it's much more the kind of like cowboy shoot 'em up. You know, one of the weird things about the Western is like, it is such a, there are so many things wrong with that genre, you know, that it's like, in a cowboy shoot 'em up, the people that you're shooting are often like, you know, Native Americans or whatever, and that's kind of horrible, and it makes it really hard to enjoy it at all. But this is kind of, you know, I was going to compare it to Call of Juarez Gunslinger, which is a game that also does that, but it has that kind of like, it's a goofy Western, you know, like that's the vibe of this. And while I love Red Dead and I love how seriously it takes itself, you know, this is a really silly property, but a silly property with like really good songs and solid gameplay. And so, you know, there's no pathos in this, but there is just kind of like the wacky fun that I think you can have with the Western genre if you take away all of the kind of horrible themes that it built itself on.
What's like one really cool moment from the DLC that's gonna like stick with you and you like really want to tell people about?
Sure. I mean, there are absolutely moments that I won't spoil, but there are some where they the enemies are all kind of the same enemy, just in Pistol Whip in general. It's just a guy shooting at you, and sometimes they have more or less armor. But in this, they have just kind of taken the incredible step of like, sometimes they put them on horses. And so you have these scenes where there are like, you know, kind of 6 horses running at you with guys on top of them. And they're able to kind of like throw the guys at you exactly within the beat of the song. So you're like shooting people off horses as the song kind of has scored you shooting those guys off horses. And it's just so good. Like it is, I have often thought that Pistol Whip feels like the game that a 1980s movie about the future would have kids playing in the arcade. You know, it's like when 1980 was trying to predict 2021, this is kind of the game that they thought people would be playing. And it turns out that game fucking rules.
So, I mean, we start off with the Bone Zone, and the reason I'm thinking is because Swede was chiefly the architect of this place.
Yeah.
That over there is my house. I think Swede gave me some tips and got it functional, though that is actually the second revision of my house, because the first was built very early on in the game and was an absolute nightmare. I got really overambitious, and, well, Valheim has a very interesting building system, which we'll get into.
Yeah.
But we went from, like, me struggling to build that, and, well, then I built the warehouse, which we can see over... Well, you can't actually see it because the village is very dense, but over the other side of it, I wound up managing to build that, and that is a very difficult structure. What we're standing on right now is actually a very interesting thing, because this was me fighting the game system. Materials can only go up to a certain height off of an anchor, off of the ground usually. So the higher up you make a thing, the harder it is to put a roof. And you've also got to put down support beams and put down things like that. So you have to make the foundation and skeleton of a house to get it standing. And that just means even building something relatively simplistic kind of feels rewarding, because you are working within the game systems and kind of puzzling out, how can I make this, how can I make that? And if you make something grand, it's really, really exceptionally good. Even if you make something simple, there's a kind of testament to the work you had to put in to get that result
Absolutely.
out. We forested and deforested this place over and over again, and every time we play, I am incredibly paranoid someone will chop this tree down and ruin this.
Which I guess is why you put a little wooden protector around it.
Yeah, and that's partly why, and I say this with, I mean, some arrogance, who cares, but this is my favorite village in all the video games, because it's ours, but it also feels storied. It's our stories, but, you know, every building kind of speaks to an era of where we were in the game. Like, let's go to I had to divert, but let's talk about Skeletom's house. Skeletom stopped playing with us quite as much. I think he just kind of fell out of interest with the game quicker than we did. But this is the oldest surviving structure. Sorry, your house is the oldest surviving structure because you built it out of a building that was already here. And then I built and rebuilt my house. So I guess this makes this the second oldest structure in the building when we still didn't fully grasp the mechanics, and Skeleton got kind of ambitious, and every time we play, I think Swede will mention 5 times an hour, I'm gonna fucking tear this thing down, and we have to stop him.
Yeah, he's not a fan of the aesthetics of his house, and as a result, we just end up throwing signs on it with all these different things. Yeah, because it's called the Pig House, because...
well, if we go around back...
one of the more recent... I want to say recent, but I guess... No, I think this is
old. This is old. We discovered... That's another element we didn't even talk about, was animal herding, but it's not exactly original, but yeah, we got a pig farm here, though we never actually kill them. I don't know. We just have this collection of
It's the whole point of having them, because there was something that we discovered, which was... because you can get berries in this game, like naturally occurring like just out in the forest, and if you throw a berry on the ground for a wild hog, not only does it start to domesticate them, but once they are fully domesticated, it generates piglets. And so we have all these pigs just in this little trough, and just
the trough didn't used to be this orderly, because I remember you and Swede spending a session just trying to coax them out from underneath the hell
remember the pig luge.
Hello, I'm Tehsnakerer. I do long-form video game videos on obscure jank and Yakuza, which is steadily becoming less obscure jank. Well, what is my game of the year? Well, James, if you would only look around at this game that you are also
I know, look at us, where are we?
We are in the wondrous world of Valheim. So, Valheim is a crafting, survival, adventure, boss rush. No, not a boss rush. But yeah, it's a survival crafting game, and the reason I like it is because it's one of the more structured, intricate, and focused ones, I would say. It's on the Knockout forums, which I browse regularly, and I check game mega threads, and a little bit of word of mouth around the game's release. And the word of mouth was very... that was pretty much what took this game, is everyone going, oh, it's a new survival crafting game. But guys, trust me, this one's good, because everyone gets a bit cagey about suggesting the big popular genre.
Yeah.
Everyone has to be like, but no, this one does it right, even though the genre was already popular and doing things right. What this one did was... Well, the tricky part about it was, the word of mouth was... It was very spoiler heavy, because they're like, no, there's gameplay features in this one, and those gameplay features, they really bring it into its own, and they add something to the survival experience. So we can't tell you what they are, but trust us, it's banging.
So,
like, you remember, we were all talking about, let's not grind ahead, let's not spoil ourselves on the mechanics.
One of the earliest things that was kind of decided was, don't check the wiki. Just do...
Yeah, we were going to learn all of this for each other and share our knowledge and pool it together, and that made it a lot more fun. Because I think... Because as we went on with it, I liked roaming about a lot more. I like kind of adventuring and doing, like, odds and ends and gathering. I enjoyed that. You enjoyed the farming aspects and, like, kind of tagging along on the adventures and doing that. And Swede... Swede
likes building. Yeah.
Oh, that was another thing about it. Yeah, that was another thing that people touted, was that, no, it's early access, but this is basically a complete game. You could jump in on the earliest of the early access, and you had a tens of hour experience which carried that time.
Yeah. But, what's your kind of, like, experience with previous survival games, I suppose?
I did get I played Minecraft when it was in dev.
Yeah.
And I liked it. I liked it a bit, and I kind of followed that over the years, and it was kind of my podcast game for a while. But I kind of slipped off as it kind of got feature creepy, and I think the older I get, the more I just dislike open-ended experiences.
Would you say that Valheim kind of is in opposition to that, or does it just kind of do what Minecraft does better, or...?
I mean, it has its own unique charm, and I think it onboards me because it's a survival crafting game, but it does have goals that are set by the game. Like, I am a person who, in my own life, I can set my own goals, and I enjoy pursuing them, but in a game, I like the game to tell me a place I've got to get to, and then it's on me to figure out the steps and get there. I like having a clear finish line to cross where the game can say, you did it, champ, you're doing it. And Valheim does that because you're dropped into the world and, you're told, go hunt these bosses, go do this. And it's a wide open world. They are miles away from you.
Yeah.
And then everything you do, no matter how minor, you can kind of mentally file that as this is contributing towards that larger goal in some way. But this gazebo, the Bone Zone, as we have named it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it got the name. Oh yeah, because it was full of skeletons when it was.
Yeah, we had a ton of skulls.
We put a bunch of skulls. Yeah, and then it became the Bone Zone, and that's another thing I want to get into later. How it kind of this town we had. Part of my favorite thing of it was this village developing its own culture from us, just attributing meaning to like where we were in the game when we built it and what we were doing, but.
Yeah.
Essentially, having the bosses there and having an end goal in mind, it adds to me a sense of meaning through the journey. It means that all the steps I take along the way to getting to that goal personalize the adventure and kind of give it that meaning. Whereas Minecraft does now have an end boss, but there are other elements that just kind of make me... It doesn't give me that sense of connection and storyline and steps that this one does. And I think that's another thing. It unfolds in a really nice way where the game starts and you have very little tools and you kind of got to discover, okay, how do I get wood? How do I build an axe? And then you get an axe and then you can chop down trees and do that, and your means of acquiring goods expands, and then you can acquire new goods, and then you acquire those goods, and it's not just that you get incrementally better materials, I mean, you kind of do, but each of those new materials also bring new gameplay mechanics with them, so everything escalates really nicely. It's not just, in Minecraft, again, going to the classic, you get, a wooden sword, a stone sword, a metal sword, and a diamond sword, and your opportunities, your things that you can uniquely do with them, do not feel like they expand as much. I mean, at the upper end with redstone and hell materials and stuff like that, it kind of does. But this is nice and incremental, and it feels like genuine tech levels kind of get hit in an abstract. And it's like, it gets really exciting, not just in this will make adventuring easier and like make actually getting into new biomes that were previously kicking my ass. Like, the world is genuinely dangerous at the start. And that is the nice curve of it, is that it's a game where it does genuinely feel like you become more capable. Even if it's on some level artificial numbers that raise you up. It does feel like also the knowledge you carry makes things
100%.
simpler.
Yeah, you're leveling up as just getting better items and stuff, but it is more so the more that you figure out of the world, and it's like little rules to how stuff works. Like one of the first things you worked out was like parrying, and you got like really into that with enemies.
Yeah, I really like parry mechanics, and then that just became... And from there I was like, well, I need to use a shield and a sword, because then I can make my parries much more effective, and that's how I kind of started fighting. That's actually another thing I liked, was that we kind of naturally gravitated towards our weapon classes. And I don't know if that was just, we're all filling our roles, or it was a kind of personality-ish thing, whereas I like kind of speedy defensive characters who can like quickly... You do a lot of like little hits or like very big block hits. Swede went for a giant sodding axe. You went maces, and...
Yeah, I just found it a bit more like... It was very obvious the damage that I was doing with a mace. That's kind of why I ended up sticking with it, really.
Yeah. Oh, and also I went for the bows and arrows, but then we kind of all did, because that was just a handy fallback. And Swede also has that throwing harpoon that you can reel things in with. Which we haven't used but...
No, I think it's something that you kind of use on the open ocean, which, again, I think that was like one of the big breakthroughs for us, was when we could get like a ship sailing and stuff like that.
It facilitated those fun evenings very, very well, where it's a game that was just the perfect level of engagement, because there were some days where we'd maybe do an hour of the thing, and then we would just potter around the village for an hour doing odds and ends and, like, you know, brewing and making food and farming, and just that all that stuff would come in handy for when we weren't in the village. But then we'd just have those kind of like we were just doing, you know. It was just the podcast interview thing we just did was maybe slightly more structured, but also just kind of what we would do some evenings. It was just a very elaborate, fancy chat room, and that sounds like a put down, but I don't know, when you just want to unwind, it was kind of perfect for that, because it was just the right level of mental activity.
I guess I'll ask then, even though we've sort of kind of gone in and out of them, is there like one particular moment of playing Valheim that has like stuck with you, or has been something that, like, if anyone's been on the fence talking to you about the game, that you've told them as kind of like this is the sort of thing that I've only been able to get in this game, and it's like a moment that's gonna stick with me.
And funny enough, it's kind of very much the opposite of everything we just talked about, but I appreciate it for the contrast it brought, which is, do you remember the first time we came across the plains?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so we were going out on an expedition, we were hunting some boss or another, and we were in uncharted waters, we were in uncharted territory, and the boat got hit, and the boat got destroyed. And I was the only one who survived the swim to shore, because swimming in the game is stamina-based and you'll drown without it. And once I was at the shore, I was like, shit, what do I do? I'm in unfamiliar territory, I've got very little to my name, and I have to get back to base. I don't want to lose my stuff. I had the teleport materials on me, so on my own, I had to kind of sneak through this very hostile zone, sneak around it, sneak out, and then get to this little island and build a teleporter base all by myself, while enemies that could one-shot me were just kind of hovering in the distance, and I had to evade them and be very cautious. And I don't know, it was the game's most tense moment for me, and it just kind of came about through entirely emergent systems and the game just throwing us maybe getting a little bit ahead of ourselves and just having to pull ourselves out of the fire. And we still haven't overcome the plains in the hours and hours we played. We did play at a very lackadaisical, slow pace, and we know there's stuff we want out of the plains, and it's just making the steps to get there requires armors that we haven't crafted yet, and crafting big armors means we would have to genuinely get out somewhere and ferry the metals back, because metals cannot be teleported. Valheim is to Minecraft as Apex Legends is to kind of PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. It kind of focuses in on, it finds the fun in those elements, and it caters in on that, and it turns the mechanics that were already established, and it looks at them and it thinks, well, what can we do different? What has the early groundwork missed that we can turn around and re-examine and do something more fun with? And it's more focused, and it's sharper in its construction, and, you know, a bit more polished, and that's kind of what I feel Valheim does in a lot of ways. It's an examination of everything that exists in these genres, but trims the fat and thinks, okay, if this system is just dragging it down, how do we keep the system but meaningfully reinterpret it into something that's more fun and more active and more player controlled, and all of that, all those ideas essentially.
If somebody was maybe on the fence about getting into Valheim, what would be one thing that you would tell them that maybe you didn't know going in that you think would get them off on the right foot? Or do you think it's good just going with, like, zero idea?
That is the thing, because I think by now, if they've watched this, they've kind of already been spoiled, so my answer is way too late on this. But it is more or less, don't go in expecting surprises, I guess. Go in expecting a more polished version. If you think survival games feel a bit empty to me, they feel a bit unguided, just kind of go in with a goal. I like just interesting odds and ends, even if they don't totally add up, because I've played a lot of games over my life, and I don't know, polish doesn't do as much for me as weird, interesting stuff anymore, and I'm sorry to turn this back to myself when this is meant to be guiding other people, but it's kind of like, I don't know what to tell people to enjoy Valheim. If you enjoy survival games, this is the next step. If you don't enjoy them, this one might have the skeleton to kind of onboard you. but it is fundamentally still a survival game. And while this isn't possible of everyone, I played a bit of Valheim solo. I didn't enjoy it. Get some mates, set an evening aside once or twice a week and chill out and pursue group goals. That makes it a much harder thing because now I'm telling 3 or 4 people to buy a game. But
yeah.
Here's my advice to get into this game: get 2 more people to get into the game with you.
Okay.
It's nice to have a game that is just an excuse to talk to mates.
Yeah.
And I guess that makes you and Swede and Skeleton the games of the year, I guess, rather than Valheim, but I don't know. That's just kind of what it fit into. It was like, hey, this is just the perfect excuse for us to just chill out together and just have something that's just mentally there enough that we can feel like we're doing something, even if we're really not. We didn't even finish the game. I don't know if we ever will at our pace, but I don't know. I feel I had enough fun with it to kind of just justify that. You don't have to finish a game to have like at least a very informed opinion on it, I don't feel.
Hi, my name is Kevin, and people would know me from the YouTube channel Arcadology and the podcast Pixel It. So, my game of the year is Death's Door. Death's Door is basically I would call it a Zelda-like. If I was going to use a genre, it's a straight up action adventure. It's got a lot of Zelda at its heart. It's got a lot of Dark Souls at its heart in terms of by that I mean like shortcuts and whatnot. It is just a cute little game in which you play as a little corvid bird, I believe a crow. And he is just like a little baby Grim Reaper who's going around collecting souls. I'm trying to recall the exact point at which I was like, oh yeah, this is a thing. This is a game I need to play. I feel like somebody was tweeting about it. Somebody I follow on Twitter. Who it was, I don't know. Could have been like Bombs Fall, Scott Benson, the developer of Night in the Woods, or it might not have been him, and I'm misattributing it. But somebody was just like, Death's Door, this is so good. So I looked at the graphics, loved the art style, picked it up, and had a blast with it. One of the neatest things about Death's Door, and it's not a specific moment, but more of a theme to the game, is death positivity, which is something that is not necessarily approached that often in games.
No.
This theory of we shouldn't be fearing or trying to run away from death. Everything has its time. Life ends and it's part of a cycle. And embracing the fact that when people die, it's not, obviously it's worth being sad over, but we shouldn't be prolonging the inevitable just for a few moments of, I guess, bad life or just poor experiences. It portrays death as something that is necessary for all beings, and I thought that was something really interesting in contrast to the very cutesy art style. It does a really good job with that theme and telling that story. Yeah, it took me a bit by surprise. I keep relatively low expectations for games and storytelling. I have a very high bar for storytelling overall. A lot of games that we usually say have great stories, I personally don't necessarily agree with. not to throw any games under the bus, I think what a lot of times what we view as great story is something that would have been an okay, maybe Oscar baity story in movies, in like a movie sense. But when a game pulls it off, we're like, oh, that's awesome. The fact that Death's Door is able to communicate these themes with basically a silent protagonist and such a disarming art style is, to me, that's very beautiful storytelling, and doing it in a very subtle way. I was very surprised by it. I would say it can be surprisingly difficult. It's not, I would say it's not necessarily an easy game. That being said, it's not super long. You might have some frustration with some bosses, but once you get through it, once it kind of clicks with you, it becomes just a joy to play. But I would recommend to anybody taking their time, looking around for secrets, just embracing the world that it's set in, and really having fun. Death's Door feels like a game that when you look at it, you're not necessarily sure why someone would say it's a game of the year, right? It seems like a game that in a lot of years would just be, you would look at it and you would assume that like, it's probably a 7 or 8 out of 10. It's just a solid little fun game. But I think it's so infrequent that you get an experience from beginning to end that is so thoughtfully curated and packaged that it really, there wasn't another game that I played this year that really stacked up to it in terms of me, I would say me grinning like an idiot from beginning to end, because I was just thoroughly enjoying the experience so much.
I am Weighty. I am probably known best for just the singular video I've put out in my essaying sort of career so far. Game of the year wise, I haven't really bought or played too much that's exclusive to releasing this year. Like, I have bought, the Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl game, and it's great, but I don't know if I'd really consider it my game of the year. So there's also Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania, and while it's hard to say it's my game of the year because I still feel like the original Super Monkey Balls are better. This one, it's still a good time, and I feel like they finally rekindled some of that magic that the originals had, that all these previous ones leading up to Banana Mania have kind of like lost in the process. So this one's like really good. But I mean, recently I gotta say, after finally diving into it last night, Halo Infinite is probably shaping up to be my game of the year for just the multiplayer alone.
If you want, we can kind of touch upon Super Monkey Ball, and then obviously we'll get into Halo Infinite a little bit from it. So what's your kind of previous experience with the Monkey Ball series then?
So it's weird with Super Monkey Ball because I didn't play the original one all that much. Like, I played it a lot with my two brothers, and we would do the arcade mode where you could kind of switch off, take turns going through like what you would see in the regular adventure maps. And that's kind of like all the experience I had with the first game, but it was really with the second game like where all my fascination with the series comes from, because that's kind of like where you get all the bonkers stage ideas, and you get like the mini games with Monkey Target and Monkey Bowling and Monkey Billiards, and there's just so much to it. And like it's kind of weird to think that I probably spent more time in just the mini games alone than any adventure mode. I don't think I ever even completed the story mode. So when I was watching LiamTriforce, he was playing Banana Mania on stream like a day after it came out, and I was seeing him do the later game stages, and I was like blown away because I'd never seen that before. But it's because I've probably also spent so much time just distracted on the mini games playing with my brothers that I never got around to it. But like, I don't know, I just love the series so much for how creative and like out of this world it feels, like physics wise, how perfect they got it just back in like 2002, I think, when the second game came out. And it was so like tragic for the longest time how much they were missing the mark with applying gimmicks to the formula. Like I forgot the one that just came out recently, but it was the one on the Wii where you had to use the motion controls. Yeah, and they remastered that one first. That was the one that came out maybe 2 years ago. And everyone was like, oh god, we gotta buy this again because this is what's gonna lead them to being provoked to making the original games over again. And so I think with enough sales or enough convincing or enough people watching Nick Robinson, for better or worse, I think that it actually did lead to something good here. And I feel like Banana Mania is like the first real valiant effort they've put out in a while, especially since like the original development team I don't think is a part of it anymore. I mean, I don't know too much of the internals at Sega, but it's really quite commendable what they're able to pull together here in getting close enough to the original feel, but also modernizing enough so new players aren't kind of left out on it.
You did kind of already mention that it was Liam's stream that kind of got you into it, but considering the fact that there was a bit of a wilderness period for the franchise, what do you think it was about Banana Mania that made you want to pick it up?
So aside from it just being a brand new Monkey Ball game that I had to support, especially for the price point, I think it was only $40 or $30, $40 maybe if you got like the Bells and Whistles edition. And they had like Hello Kitty in there as a DLC character, which is cool. But aside from that, like I think it being a full package, kind of a full retail release of the first game, of the second game, and of the deluxe version that came out later after 1 and 2, that were more kind of like the expert mode stages, like the stuff you'd only see in like the YouTube compilations when you're a kid and you're like, how is this stuff real? They finally rebundled all that together, and so seeing all of that plus kind of like the legacy things we've gotten throughout the years with the series, like the later characters that kind of came with the series, I forget some of their names, but there's like a little lemur character and another sort of gorilla-like character like Gong Gong, and so it's cool. It's kind of like when Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled happened and we got like a straight remake of what we liked so much, but it also wasn't afraid to dive into the annals of Crash history and give us these more obscure characters that probably would have been dropped off by like any other developer, and we kind of get that with Banana Mania as well, which is cool. And on top of it, like them redoing all the mini games over again, you know, even though I don't think some of the efforts are as strong this time around, like Monkey Targets feels totally different, but it's still cool that we got all of this in the year 2021 when a lot of this stuff kind of would have just been like dropped in favor of like streamlining it, you know? I feel like the only thing to expect out of it is fun because like you find the playable monkey that you like, and since they all control the same and the control scheme is so simple, it's literally just a button to kind of move the map to the orientation you would like so that you could either see more of the stage or like zoom it in more, which helps with some hazards on some stages. But otherwise, you know, you're literally just using the left stick to move around, and like I feel like it's so approachable and so accessible, and like it's kind of one of those games that like you can't really appreciate until it's in your hands. Like it's so based on that game feel, that like ebb and flow of just like rolling to each goal. I feel like this is the most approachable Monkey Ball has ever been, even with how like accessible the original games were. Like, this game is just so bright and so colorful, and like the monkeys themselves are filled to the brim with personality. And I don't know, I feel like you really can't go wrong, especially if you see it on a sale, and knowing that the original concept was created by the guy Nagoshi, who made Yakuza. It's even more impressive to be like, wow, this is the history kind of behind his work in the field.
I guess before asking kind of on your thoughts of Infinite, I guess I'll ask, what's your history with the Halo series?
Alright, well, when I discovered Halo, it was with my best friend, probably back in 5th grade, and I went over his house after he came over mine to play Smash Bros, and I think that's kind of where he fell in love with Smash, and same as I with Halo 2, and we played it back on the original Xbox as well, because I think all that was out on the 360 at the time was 3, but I don't know, he just had the original Xbox hooked up, and we played Halo 2, and going into some of those maps, like, you know, there weren't any bots, it was just us two, and like, that was my first exposure to first-person shooters, because previously, I grew up on like the PlayStation 2 and the GameCube, and a lot of those games are either platformers or just third person in general, and this being a first person shooter, like, I had never controlled anything like it, and the feel of like the weight of your characters when you would jump around, and how you kind of have this like heavy moon jump and stuff, like it was just all so like captivating. And so I remember that same year, I believe in like 2010 or so, we asked for a 360 for Christmas, and we got that, and I got Halo Reach alongside it. And like, while my thoughts on Halo Reach's like design are different these days, that game was just intoxicating. Like, it was all I played for probably the first like couple years of owning the 360 until I got like Fallout New Vegas. And yeah, that game was just amazing as well. Just like the whole aesthetic behind it and the music and everything, like, I was just blown away. And playing it in split screen with my younger brother was really great too, even though like for some reason on the multiplayer, you know, that like slot machine bonus you would get from playing multiplayer matches.
Oh yeah,
in split screen they disable it. and so it was funny because we would play with our friends online who were all like solo queuers, and they would get the slot machine bonus, so they would always be like higher levels than me, and for the longest time I was just at like Brigadier grade 3 or rank 3 or whatever it was, and like, because I would never get that slot bonus playing with my younger brother. But it was such a great time regardless. Just like the Forge world was like the most like mind-bending thing ever with how large it was, and like just the sound design there was just like, oh my god. And then now Halo Infinite literally got me to reinstall the whole Master Chief Collection last night, and like, wow, you know, it was brutal, but like so worth it. I hopped in Halo 3 for just a little bit, and like, I think Halo 3 is probably my favorite. Just like, I remember a game truck came to like our 7th grade lunch, and like, you were only able to like go in there once, and then they force you out on the other side, but I kept like going back and like just crushing all these kids, and it was just so good. Like, one of the best memories ever. It's definitely different in the sense that I think it proves, I was kind of like dwelling on this all night, but I think it proves that 343 has had great ideas all along. They just have never had the right framework to apply these within. Like, Sprint was always handled a bit better in like Halo 4 and beyond, just because like in Reach, having Sprint as an armor ability that not everybody would select would make it so like matches were kind of lopsided, you know, because you'd have some people like shooting into the air with jetpacks, or some people literally standing in place with the armor lock, or people zipping around on like boots to the ground with Sprint. But like 4 was like, okay, let's just give everyone Sprint to eliminate that. But then in addition to that, they kind of had like all the other armor abilities, and it still had that like lopsided feel. And then 5 was like, what if we go more like MOBA with this? And like, I guess they kind of had some like Quake sensibilities where it's like, okay, we're gonna make sure everyone has like the same access to like mobility options with like the thruster pack that was built in, but it was still not really Halo in a way. And like, I don't know, I feel like sprint and like all these other things that are like, oh, the 3 pillars of Halo, like grenades, guns, and melee, I feel like that stuff sort of stifled the discourse around 343's abilities for the longest time. And like, I feel like Infinite's finally the package that like putting these kind of like old Bungie design philosophies in with like their newer, more approachable, I guess more modernized stuff, to put it at parity with its peers. It finally like comes together, because like making the equipment work in the way it does now with like grapple hooks and stuff, and like the thruster packs are still there, but they have charges and stuff, and like everyone can sprint, everyone can mantle, but those are pretty much like the only holdovers from 4 and 5, like at least in your base mechanical arsenal. So like, I don't know, like I feel like it's finally like shown what 343 can do when they're like playing to their strengths, and like they're not, I feel like the longer development cycle has also helped them with like really nailing that game feel, because like playing Halo 3 and Infinite back to back last night, it was kind of amazing how close of an experience I was having to both of them. Like I know it's just so like generic and it's so nebulous, it doesn't really like strike to any core of like what Halo even is, but like I don't know, like I feel like they're on to something with how just how this like zeitgeist around it is going. And yeah, like I feel like leapfrogging from Reach to Infinite kind of helped in a way of like going back to appreciate 343's work with the other games, because like I don't know, like I feel like they're for the longest time I was like, Halo 4 and 5 are fan fiction, like these games don't matter. And like as cool as the stuff as like the Forerunner or Prometheans were, I was like, this stuff is just like totally unnecessary. Like capitalism woke Master Chief back up from his slumber for what, you know? But like now it's like, I don't know, it's a lot easier to go back to 4 and 5, and like especially I want to revisit 4's campaign, because I'm like, you know, maybe there was some stuff in here that like the discourse wouldn't let me look at necessarily, because it was almost like dirty to appreciate Halo post Bungie. But like now it feels right. It feels like there's finally some common ground among everyone who's playing it, where it's like, yeah, this is dope, aside from the progression and the customization, which I feel is lacking, but you know. And yeah, I don't know, like I feel this is just really gonna be a great entry, and given that it's like capping off this year, it'll be interesting to see how it like compares to all the other like late or long running series entries that we've gotten up to this point.
I am Error. I make YouTube videos about a lot of different stuff. So my game of the year, game of 2021, did not come out in the year 2021. But as many beta alpha games go, you know, it's like, how do you tell what year they came out? But it is Ultra Kill. Ultra Kill is a first-person shooter, kind of Quake and Doom, and maybe even a little bit like Devil May Cry. In it, you play as this robot who's descending through really a Dante's Inferno vision of hell. So you're going through like all these different rings of hell. It's super fast-paced, like action nonstop. But like it's a game I played a lot, obviously. But it's also just a game that's just, it really, you can play it as fast as possible. Like you can really just like, and I really like that. That's probably my favorite feature of the game, but I don't know if I'm explaining it well. But that's a little bit about Ultra Kill. It's a first person shooter, really fast paced, very, very Quakey.
You mentioned Quake and Doom as kind of its nearest ancestors, I suppose. What is your experience with those two games in particular?
I played Doom, Hexen, Quake in the 90s when they came out because my dad was a big PC gaming kind of enthusiast at the time. So those are some of my first experiences playing games at all. So they definitely have a soft spot in my heart, but in general, right, I like the more fast-paced games. I don't like waiting. I want to just play the damn game, and Ultra Kill really does that well. I don't like games like Call of Duty or Battlefield. Very much like every time I try to play one of them, I just get so bored. A lot of games, I think they don't. A lot of games have grown past the Doom kind of model, which was, Doom is like search and destroy. It's like the entire model of the game is just like go and kill and shoot stuff. And it's interesting because I think when I say that, it kind of sounds almost God complexy, right? Like, wow, you just want to, be a god and just kill everything. Like, and, then you get into stuff about like violence games and Columbine shooters and stuff. But like, if you go back and play Doom, you're like playing it like on an appropriate difficulty for your own skill level, you're going to die. Like those demons punch really hard. Like, it's not really like a god fantasy. It's more about, I think what those old school FPS games do and what Dusk and Medieval and Ultra Kill especially do really well is giving you just an inch too much to handle. That's where I want to be, right? That's my problem with the Call of Duties and the Battlefields and like the Far Cries is that they don't give you enough to do. Like maybe it's the StarCraft player in me and thinking about actions per minute or something, right? But in an Ultra Kill, it always feels like I can't do everything, right? Like I'm just slightly overwhelmed, and that's the tuning, right? The tuning should be you should always feel, at least when you're in combat, slightly overwhelmed.
In Doom and kind of games that focus on the shooting, there's like depth to the shooting, and like to me is that the games that you really gel with are the ones that do focus on shooting front and center, like making that feel as good as possible.
I want a game that does one thing really well. Like I think I'm personally, like this is my taste, I'm really sick of games that just like do 50 things mediocrely, and it's like, but look, we did 50 things. It's like, but it's all mediocre. It's like Tetris does one thing and it does it amazing, right? Like that's fun to me, and like I guess I think you hit the nail on the head. It's like, when I play Battlefield, it's like, oh, there's a lot going on here. There's gotta capture the flag, gotta do this, gotta do that. It's like, and I guess you could feel overwhelmed by that, but I don't know. I just feel like it's all just kind of a little mediocre.
Yeah.
Though to be fair, I have been enjoying playing Halo Infinite the past couple days, so maybe I'm a big hypocrite.
How did you initially find out about Ultra Kill?
That is a great question. I have no clue. I think I really don't know. Maybe I saw somebody on Twitter like tweet like, oh, I really like Ultra Kill or something, and I threw it on my Steam wish list. Oh, that looks good. Like I really like Doom Eternal, right? And Ultra Kill is, I think there's at least one video on YouTube that is like Ultra Kill is Doom Eternal but better or something like that, right? So like it's like there's a lot of comparisons between that and Doom Eternal. And Doom Eternal is the kind of shooter I also like really like. I really like weapon swapping, for instance, like in Doom Eternal. And I think I'd read or seen something that was like, Ultra Kill's really good. It's kind of like Doom Eternal. And I was like, I think I just logged it away in my brain. And then I think I was just bored in like May. I just finished like a huge video and I think I was just looking for something else to do. I think I just bought Ultra Kill and I started playing it. Low expectations, high satisfaction, right? So I try not to go into games with too much, I think the big thing, this is what I would say to like anybody who really wants to like games or just like review games for like a living or whatever. Go into games expecting to like them, Yeah. Like don't go into Cyberpunk 2077 and be like, oh man, this game's a glitch fest and it sucks and I'm gonna hate this. Like don't play. Like if you're not excited to play the game, God, just don't do it. But anyways, so as I was playing, I think I kind of let the game teach me what it was about, I would say. So I would say I try to have like very little expectations, and I think that yielded a much more exciting game. It's not very much like Doom Eternal, I don't think. No. In like there's like definitely it's closer to Doom Eternal than it is Call of Duty, right? But it's very much in a different ballpark, I would say. There at the end of Act 1, there's an episode. It's episodes, right? So like each episodes might be there. It's like levels. That's the video game word for it. They're levels, right? And there's a level called Clair de Lune. It's like after all this, like literally up until this point, it's been nonstop action, and then all of a sudden, the sweet song of Clair de Lune is playing. And you're in this like quiet study. There's no enemies. And you just gotta like go find some skulls, pick them up, put them in like the place where the skulls are supposed to go. Right? It's like a little puzzle. Like find the skulls, a little hide and seek. And then you open it up, and then kind of you enter this big cathedral, and then like a better version of yourself pops through the stained glass, and you gotta fight. And it's like so like confident. The game is so confident that this moment will work, right? Like, I mean, it's pretty bold in and of itself to just be like, okay, we're gonna put a hard break, emergency brake on, right? We're done with the action, just a simple puzzle. We're gonna play this beautiful piano song, and we're just gonna chill. And then we're gonna get to the hardest boss fight that you've had up till this point. And I think that it works just so damn well. I've been thinking a lot about, in the past like kind of month or two, about what makes like music good, what makes a movie good, what makes a game good. And I think a lot lately, like one of the defining things I've been feeling, like what makes something good, is that it surprises you in some way. Now, no, I'm not saying like subverts expectations. That's so stupid. Like, you know, like, I don't know, like the Game of Thrones, like, oh, you thought, you know, that it was go this way, but it went the other way. Haha, we pulled one over your eyes, right? No, that's not what I mean. You know, that's not surprising, but like, but like, you know, like a really good song, like suddenly, like, you know, 4 minutes in, it like throws something new at you. It's like, whoa, man, that was wild, right? Yeah. And I think Ultra Kill, Devil May Cry, these are games that really, they throw you for a loop, a good loop. You like good surprises.
You did say at viewers that they should just play Ultra Kill. Mm-hmm. What?
They should stop listening to this. They should go download it right now. They can keep listening while they download, but I prefer if nobody finish this video. Let's assume 200,000 people watch this. That's a good number. All 200,000 of you better be downloading Ultra Kill right now. If you haven't already played it, then if you've already played it, you can just listen. Maybe pull up Ultra Kill. You can play and listen. All right, sorry. I'm done. Bad joke.
I was going to say, though, if people were on the fence about maybe they've played other FPS games, maybe they might have played Quake 20 years ago, what would be something you would you say, what would be one bit of advice that you'd give them before going in, or would you say go in completely, well, I mean, you've kind of already said having zero expectations is like the best thing to have, but is there any kind of like one bit of advice you might give somebody if they were on the fence about getting Ultra Kill?
I think like the main thing I would say is, like, you know, do you want to no, that's stupid. My piece of advice would be to just have fun. Like, that's the kind of game this is. I think you could get, like, remember how I kind of described earlier, like, right, it's just the right amount of overwhelmed for me, right? Right. Yeah. I would say just, like, if you're worried about it, just, like, play on, like, the lowest difficulty. And you can always play on a higher difficulty later, right? Like, but just, like, you know, if you're worried about, oh, man, this is, like, a hot, really fast-paced action game, like, just play on the lowest difficulty. Just shoot some enemies. Just slide around, learn the movement. That'd probably be my big thing. Like, you press shift and like you do like a mini like little dash sprint, kind of like Dark Souls, and then but you can also do like a slide. There's a lot of movement going on, especially like after the latest update. They added a grappling hook, which is awesome, and so like there's a lot of movement. I would say play on the lowest level, learn the movement, shoot things. You'll have a good time.
My name's Hamish Black. You probably know me best from my YouTube channel, WritingOnGames, where I make videos going in depth on game design and narrative and the like. I would like to talk about Forza Horizon 5, if that's alright.
That is more than fine. I have a pretty good idea of what Forza Horizon 5 is, but let's say potentially there may be somebody listening who doesn't know about the Forza Horizon series and maybe doesn't know that there's a fifth one. So how would you describe this game to them?
I would describe it as the happiest dystopia you've ever been in, where blank automatons shovel cars at you so constantly that it's impossible to keep track. It's a racing game. Essentially, it's coming from the Forza Motorsport pedigree of sim racing games, and the Horizon series is a slightly more arcadey version of that, where it's kind of open world. It's you explore, and like I say, people bombard you with vehicles so constantly that you could never feasibly get to grips with all of them. So I only have experience with Forza Horizon 4. Before that, I played a few of the motorsport games here and there, but nothing too serious. 4 was the one that really hooked me. In many ways, it's basically the same game on a different map, and it looks slightly glossier. And I am totally fine with that, because that series has, in my eyes, the perfect balance between, like, sim-like weight. You're not going to be just like floating around corners. You kind of have to work for certain things. But it also has, like, in its default setting, it has, it's arcadey enough that you can just go wherever you want with any car. So yeah, I don't know. And that is like remained the same between at least 4. So yeah, it is possibly one of the most open-ended games I can think of in that regard. It is like I say, on its default, it is all about like just getting you into this world and like letting you loose on the world of, in this case, Mexico, I guess. The kind of philosophy of Forza Horizon is not so much to do with like, here's a challenging racing game or whatever. It really is just like, here is your racing game. And like I say, that comes down to, the game does not want you to feel unhappy at any point. So it's like you are like given cars constantly. You're constantly told how brilliantly you're doing, and here's another car, and go find this other car if you want. You don't have to, and here's all these races you can do, but you also don't have to do them. And here's some story stuff, but you don't have to do that. We'll tell you how good you are anyway. You can just beeline it across the like up a sheer volcano cliff or whatever in a Bugatti sports car if you want to. The game is not going to hold you back from that. So like, in terms of like crafting your own experience from it, it's not only something the game very readily caters for in terms of the amount of mechanical options it gives you. Like, there's a philosophical aspect to Horizon that, like, this is your game and we will robotically cater to that in whatever way we possibly can. So yeah, that's kind of the open-ended nature of Horizon, I suppose. For context, like, I really turn to racing games when I'm kind of like feeling down or whatever. That's like my kind of go-to thing. Like if I'm feeling like overwhelmed with something, then I find that in terms of games that I turn to, it's usually racing games, because the way I see it, there's very little equivocation in start, go fast, and finish first. It's like that's
sure.
It's kind of the purest form of challenge in a video game in some ways. Forza has that in spades, but it also just kind of has this overall vibe of pure positivity and just vibrancy that's kind of infectious to go along with that purity. So interestingly, the game does have like the big thing structurally about these games, at least 4 and 5. I couldn't speak to the other games, but I'm sure they have similar things. It's, you kind of build to these kind of big spectacle races where you'll be like it'll set up a race. You're racing like a train, or you're racing a plane, and it's this kind of big thing where it's kind of like a largely scripted event where you know like the idea of actually racing a plane is kind of, how do you even do that really in a video game? Like here it's just kind of, well, it's kind of just a structured cinematic, and with all these spectacle races it gets to the point where, you know, you're just getting to the finish line and you finish like a tenth of a second before the plane or whatever. It's the purest point at which the game is like, we are controlling this for you. Like every other point, like every other race you do, anything like that, it doesn't matter if you come in first or whatever. You can always retry a race if you want, but you can also like tune it to exactly how you want it in terms of the difficulty of your opponents, you know, your own car's performance and everything like that. Like you can tune every aspect of that so minutely that you can craft the exact level of challenge that you want. So if you want to get it to the point where you are just beating like the other cars, like you can make it like that, and that is more meaningful than just getting these races where you know without a shadow of a doubt that you're going to win this thing, because whatever speed you're going, they're going to program the big plane or whatever to go just slightly slower, you know, at the very last stretch. So yeah, I don't know. I think that like it is less about like winning the races all the time and more just about like, for me anyway, it's more like you say, like racing the kind of open world, but kind of doing so on my own like very kind of like unique terms, I guess. It's like you know, like I get to craft this to be exactly the experience that I want, which is usually a very dumb thing where like I just like if I set like a marker to go to like a race starting point on one point of the map, like during that race I will, you know, be like, you know, on the road, I'll be, you know, following all the kind of the correct procedure to turn corners and slowing down at the right time, because the racing feels really good. It's like a really kind of tight feeling racer and everything like that. But like as soon as that race ends, I'm like I'm setting my next objective and I am beelining it across whatever like it's, you know, the shortest fucking distance between 2 points is a straight line or whatever. It's, you know, I am just beelining it to the next destination regardless of whatever is in my way. So yeah, that's the kind of joy for me, and that's the beauty of it, that I can have that joy and the game rewards me for that in certain ways, like it would reward anyone else for playing that game however they want to play it. There's like a massive runway in like an airport runway in Forza Horizon 5 that, you know, you can just take your Bugatti and like go as fast as you can along it, and there's a massive ramp that takes you like miles into the air, and then you would, any other car would come down and fucking explode. And then like but like this one is just kind of, you know, okay, just keep going. You want to drive into the volcano? Fine, go do that. It's like, and I don't know if you know this about me, James. I play games in the dumbest way possible. Like I love daft things happening in video games whenever I can make them happen. And Forza is just like, it is the perfect balance of like very pure racing experience when you want it to be that, and exceedingly daft things like doing kind of action stunts with like a Volkswagen Beetle or whatever jumping off the side of a volcano. So it's kind of my perfect game. My favorite daftest things about that game are like the car customization, because I can take the most expensive supercar like Bugatti thing in existence and I can make it like this wood paneled nightmare with, with like where like I can, you know, you can set your own like license plate thing, but that has like a profanity sensor, so I couldn't, you know, put like fuck, shit or whatever on that. But you can apply vinyls to your car, and it has like all these kind of different letters and stuff. So I can just drive around with like horrendous like stuff on my car, just like stuff that you know, like just the like people driving around, like they'd be like, did that guy just have the word fuck plastered just on his bonnet? It's like so it's like, you know, and like there's a mischievous aspect to that I really enjoy. Like that's like that, and that's the thing, like whenever I get like a new like really expensive car, it's my goal to like mess that car up as much as humanly possible, like stick on, you know, dabbing Pikachus wherever I can, and and the fact that like the game just lets me do that and is fine with that, and also I because I couldn't get you know, any swear words on the number plate, I just put biscuit, as in like Limp Biscuit, just on it. So I'm just driving around with this like swear words all over my car and dabbing Pikachus, like the most expensive car ever made, and like biscuit is my number plate. But it's like, you know, that is the mischievous joy of that game that it allows for, you know, and so that's that those are the kinds of moments where I'm like, wow, this is incredibly daft, and it also happens to be one of the tightest racers I've played in a long time. So,
I was gonna ask, do you think much of the appeal of kind of like because like the way you describe it reminds me of like when I played like my first GTA game for the first time, Vice City, and I didn't do any of the missions. I purely just played it like, you know, you do all the stunt ramps and you do just like, you know, you go and just do a bunch of stupid shit. And I think half the fun of that is just the fact that you kind of, it's this kind of like Bart Simpson mischievousness of, oh, I'm not playing the game as the developers intended. So do you think half the fun is kind of like, it is this, God, 10 million, whatever, $200 million sandbox that Microsoft have put together here, but you can drive around a Bugatti, you know, covered in swear words, and do big ramps.
I mean, it's there is like, it is the most prestigious, you know, stupidity factory like I can imagine. And I actually think like the GTA comparison is quite apt, because I would do exactly the same thing in GTA, and playing, you know, especially the older GTAs that, you know, released in the quote unquote definitive edition recently. Like, you realize that, like, well, kind of my only real difference in terms of how I approach gameplay in both is that occasionally GTA will ask me to stop and do some like bad shooting at points. Like Forza Horizon actually kind of like captures that spirit while like remaining true to its like mechanical strengths, like in a far purer way. In many ways, like, Forza Horizon 5 is a better GTA game than GTA is. So yeah, that's it's an interesting way to look at it. I never really.
That's the box quote. The best GTA game that came out this year, Forza Horizon 5.
But yeah, so I love that. I love the kind of the mischievous factor about it. But it's you know, like I say, it's a phenomenal racing game as well. So yeah.
Hi, I'm Nevin Holmes. My pronouns are they, he. I am a queer, independent tabletop role-playing game designer. I make books with rules and text in them that tell you how to play games. I also am formerly of YouTube and IndieBytes. It's youtube.com/IndieBytes. I did a lot of video essays for a long time, and then I switched over to making role-playing games. Towards the start of 2019, I was getting very, very burnt out on YouTube. And my friends and I were starting to play a lot of tabletop games. And Kickstarter launched this thing called Zine Quest. Zine Quest has a lot of problems with it. I don't want to get into that. But it is essentially a space where Kickstarter says, okay, indie RPG creators, come and make your small games. You run a 2-week Kickstarter project, and at the end of it, you either make a very small project, very cool project, or you don't fund and you don't. I fell in love with so many things that I saw during that. There's a game by Will Jobst called Black Mass. It's a phenomenal game about two young girls running away during the Salem witch trials. There's another game by Mary Inger called Casketlands, which I think I played with you at one point.
I believe so, yeah.
And it just opened my eyes to, like, there are so many other things that games can be. So I started making them. I made Thou Hast Been Called Out, which is a very dumb, very stupid little amalgamation of anachronistic terms turned into a role-playing game. And I made Skeletons, which is about being skeletons in an IT department at a regular business. And from there, I kind of just realized that this is something that I'm good at and that I really love doing, and I've been doing it since. The last year, I think I actually officially released Gun and Slinger at the beginning of this year, at the beginning of 2021. So anybody listening who's looking for Game of the Year lists, hit me up. Then I did Kitchen Nightmares towards the beginning of this year. That's kind of been it as far as my own releases this year. I haven't done a lot of actually releasing my own games other than those. I've been doing a lot of writing for other people. I have some work in John Batts's My Body is a Cage. Jam and I both did work on that, actually. And it's been a lot of writing things in the background, working on projects, and really gearing up to do some very, very big drops next year. I love working on other people's projects. Maybe more than I love working on my own. It's very fun. It's very exciting to be trusted with someone's baby and being brought in and told, make something using my art as a framework. And getting paid to do it. It's really exciting. You get to learn a lot of things. You get to push yourself in very interesting ways. It's very much something that I love to do. Can we kind of talk in a general way about the independent scene?
You absolutely can. What is the independent scene?
What a fucking question. It depends on where you look. There's so my most recent experience with independent stuff is to do with tabletop role-playing games, you know. Dungeons and Dragons, but indie. And the what is such a, it's a lot of things. It's art, it's experimentation, it's low budget, it's high budget, it's books and games doing things and making you feel things that you probably never thought they really could. And it's a lot of queer creators making art that speaks to them and others. It is quite literally the most outside of what you can get anywhere else that you could possibly be. There are indie creators that are like, here's my kind of like take on something in the mainstream, but a lot of it, at least a lot of the stuff that I really love and engage with, is very experimental and out there. Games specifically that have done some really cool stuff. Wanderhome, I mentioned it earlier, is a fantastic game by Jay Dragon. Jay made this fantastic pastoral fantasy game. It's GM-less, so and you don't even really need to like do any prep. It's fantastic at guiding the players. It has a lot of tools in place to really help people get used to playing a game in that way. My Body is a Cage, I also mentioned, is like a Persona-inspired dungeon crawler where during the day it's kind of a slice of life TV show inspired thing, and then when your characters go to sleep, you crawl through a dungeon. It's a very emotional game, and also a very like kind of emo rock kind of thing. It's very sick. In Extremis is a game by my friend Keegan. They made this game inspired by Gideon the Ninth and stuff like that. It's extremely good. I could go on and on. If you're looking for something weirder, check out another book by Jay called Esoteric. I can't tell you anything about it. And pretty much anything that World Champ Game Co., Adam Vass, and the Brain Trust have been putting out has been phenomenal. But then, on the kind of flip side of that, there are these things called lyric games, which are basically just pieces of very experimental and emotional modern art that fit themselves within the framework of a game. Things that are, and there's a lot of like debate and discussion around what exactly a quote-unquote lyric game is, and it's extremely interesting, and it's very new, and it's very experimental, and there are just as many rules as there aren't any rules, and it's really, really cool to see people go and play with that space. There's a very fantastic article on Dicebreaker about lyric games that you should absolutely check out. I would say to look through your friend group and see if there's anyone else who is interested in playing some of the games, or maybe if there's anyone you know who knows some games. There are quite simply so many pieces out here that are so incredible. It can be very overwhelming to find anything. There are just as many games that are very easy to learn as there are games that are incredibly involved and very crunchy. And if you take a step in the wrong direction, it can really put you off right off the bat. So finding someone who knows a little bit would be a great start. Barring that, look around on itch for small role-playing games.
And what would you say would be a good way that if you wanted to try and... If this was something you were interested in and you wanted to try and get your friends into it, what would be a good pitch, do you think?
Hey, you want to roll some dice and pretend to be different people?
That's a pretty good pitch.
That's pretty much it. The pitch depends on the game, right?
Of course.
So it can very much be like, hey, do you want to be high fantasy warriors and go on adventures? Or it can be, hey, do you want to play through a mystery game where we're trying to find our friend who's gone missing and we're all sitting around each other at a table, but we can only communicate through a group text message.
Ooh.
That's Alice is Missing, and it's phenomenal.
Oh wow. There's a lot of cool stuff.
It's cool. That's what I'm saying. There are games that just like they eschew all conventions. They're incredible. I love games.
Yeah, and I guess the barrier to entry with playing them is, I mean, you don't need a 3080. I mean, a lot of them you don't even need electricity. You just need people and dice and pencils and stuff to make it work. So,
in my mind, the real barrier to entry on tabletop games is finding the right ones for you and your friends, because everybody has different tastes. Whereas with video games, it's like, okay, video games are much more mainstream. It's much easier to find someone who knows video games and say like, hey, what do you think about the new John Halo? Where it's much harder to find someone who knows well like the indie space for TTRPGs, which is incredibly niche.
What kind of stuff are you looking forward to in the next year, I suppose?
Well, there are a lot of games that dropped within the last couple of months on Kickstarter that should be releasing next year that I'm very excited for. But in general, with the space, I'm really excited to see more creators, especially more queer creators, and just people who don't really have another outlet for their voice. I'm really excited to see people push the medium in ways that I never could have thought of. And I'm really excited for art that is more experimental and even like more transgressive than some of the stuff we've already seen. I think that this space it's not a young industry, but I think that the way we are seeing it right now, it has a lot of potential for growth in some very interesting ways, and I'm excited to see it happen.
My name is razbuten. People would probably know me best for my video essays, the most popular of which being the Gaming for a Non-Gamer series, where I have my wife, who grew up not playing video games, try out games for the first time to hilarious results and interesting results, because it's a language of sorts, and seeing someone learn it for the first time is pretty fascinating. My game of the year, or the game I'd like to talk about, technically a DLC, but I like it, so I'm going to count it as a full game. And it feels like a full game based on its length and quality, is Outer Wilds Echoes of the Eye. The first elevator pitch is, if you know nothing about Outer Wilds, just play Outer Wilds. It's great. The least spoilery elevator pitch I can give is it is a game about exploring a galaxy with a rich history. It is open world in like the true sense of the word open world, in that like you can go any direction. Progression is marked by your player knowledge opposed to skill trees and moving a narrative forward. So it's open in that way. It's not necessarily our typical view of what an open world game is, but I think it really operates as at least my ideal kind of open world game. So yeah, it's a game about exploring space, and there are many mysteries within that are fun to discover. At its core, I'd say it's a puzzle game. So the main thing that the DLC brings to the table is it kind of asks a question of, so the base game has all these different worlds to explore, and the DLC is kind of like, what if we took ideas or an area to explore, and instead of having it be like something that would take about 2 to 3 hours to explore, which I think a lot of the planets in the base game is about that length, they're like, let's just make something that's going to take 10 hours, 15 hours, much longer. It's focused on one zone particularly, and just everything operates within that zone, which fundamentally is different than the base game, which is kind of like, go to this planet, and what if we tried this planet, where this is like you are exploring one very specific area. Visually, the new place to explore, and I don't want to say too much about it,
of course,
but it has like this feeling of a bayou, which is interesting. Like, right, you're playing this space exploration game, and you start, as you said, like in this very campy sort of planet, right, where you're right by a campfire and you walk around, and it's all these wooden cabin-like structures built in like a crater. And yeah, then you go to this other place that you end up exploring in the DLC, and it's like Louisiana, like marshland areas. It's just, I love that, like, because when you think a space exploration game, like, I don't know, I hear that and I'm like, all right, Mass Effect, right?
Yeah.
Or Outer Worlds, right?
You think metal corridors and people in like metal spacesuits, exactly.
Yeah. So I think it still has that folksy attitude. And as far as like music specifically, the music for the DLC is great, and it also, pays some homages to the base game soundtrack at points that, like, for me, hit very hard as someone who, feels pretty emotionally connected to the franchise. It adds in some stuff in the base game that was unanswered, and it gives interesting answers for it. So I think it improves in that way, and it just gives some more of that, like, the thing about Outer Wilds is, as I said before, the only thing in your way is knowledge. You can beat the game quite easily if you know what to do. You don't have to level up. You don't have to get certain items. You just have to know how the game works. And that's so much fun, and it's so cool. The problem is, once you know everything, you can't really play it again. You can jump in the world, you can fly around, you can go through the motions, but you can't have that feeling of, oh, that's what this is, or oh, that's how you do this. So, it was just nice to feel that way again.
Yeah.
From Outer Wilds. So that's what that's one thing that the DLC really offered, was just that hit of dopamine that Outer Wilds gave so much of. I'm just like, yeah, that feels good. I solved that. I would still say though, like, this could not exist and it'd be fine. If that, I don't know, that might be a bad pitch. It's like, here's a better way to frame it. I don't think I needed this DLC, right? Like, sometimes, you might play a sequel or a DLC and be like, I needed this. I needed this to come out. This made things so much better for the game, the world, the story that was being told. I think this does improve those things, and this does scratch that itch. I also would have been completely content with the base game. So I think maybe that helped going into this, of like, I had my expectations low, and it wasn't something like, I need this to be good. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's more like, yeah, exactly. It's more, it doesn't reinvent the Outer Wilds. It is an expansion back in its purest terms, as in, it fills in some of the gaps from the base game, and I assume that, because kind of what I know of the Outer Wilds, is that it's an investigation game, essentially. There is a mystery that is uncovered, and as you said, you don't get new abilities and you don't get power-ups. The power is knowledge, and your knowledge grows as the game goes on. That is kind of something that the DLC adds, is a new mystery to solve, I'm guessing.
Yeah. What I'll say is, one of my biggest joys as, person who make video on internet and talk about Outer Wild all time is when people say, hey Raz, I played Outer Wilds based on your suggestion and it's my favorite game ever.
Great.
That's a very good feeling. So to spread the good word of Outer Wilds feels good. So that's part of it. But also more of the seeing people's experiences. A big thing that people who love Outer Wilds do, myself included, is watching people play it for the first time. There are a fair amount of I have gone into enough Twitch streams to watch people play Outer Wilds for the first time that I recognize other chatters who are doing the same thing. And I'll chat and they'll be like, oh, hey Raz, good to see you here. And I'll recognize their username from some other stream of Outer Wilds that I watched 2 weeks ago, So there's a small but dedicated community that just wants to, I think, capture that feeling of playing it again for the first time so badly that we watch other people do it. And it can be super fascinating to be like, wow, they did it in a way that I never would have thought was possible. So it's cool when someone essentially teaches you about the game, right? As an expert, quote unquote expert of it,
And I guess maybe will you be keeping up the tradition now that you've played and I assume beaten the DLC? You'll be watching how people approach the DLC in different ways, I guess.
Yep. Yeah, I already have. And watched one guy just completely break the game constantly, and I was like, this is wild. How did you do that? It was great. So one thing that I think is interesting about the DLC is it is kind of a standalone thing.
Okay.
You could just play the DLC, although I really can't imagine someone just playing the DLC without having played the base game.
Yeah.
That seems pretty wild to me. One thing that's interesting though, and this is more of just a general conversation and not even necessarily something I like, because it's actually more of a concern, is they're now selling like the full edition, right, of Outer Wilds,
right,
which is the base game combined with the DLC. And I think that the DLC is probably best enjoyed having beaten the base game.
Okay.
So I'm very curious to see people playing Outer Wilds for the first time who have bought that like full edition with the DLC, like, because you could access the DLC on the start of a new file, right? You don't have to have beaten the game or gotten to a certain point in the base game. Like, you can just do it. So I'm very curious moving forward to see like how new players might grapple or engage with that, and if it would positively or negatively impact their experience with the game as a whole.
It makes me think of a weird analogy, but it kind of reminds me of back in the early 90s with the Sonic the Hedgehog games. They had Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Sonic and Knuckles, but the intent apparently from the start was that they were always just meant to be a single Sonic the Hedgehog 3, but due to like the RAM limitations and like production schedule, they had to split it into 2 games essentially, which is why the Knuckles cart has this lock-on technology that you can have Knuckles and Sonic 2 and Blue Spheres in 1, but the intent is that you then play it as a complete experience. And as a result, in like later conversation down the line, it's just kind of become a thing that people will just treat the 2 games as a single game, even though that wasn't how it was originally released.
Yeah.
So do you think something like that could happen with Outer Wilds, where down the line the conversation will become, oh no, this was always intended to be a single game, where I think almost what you're saying is that because of the nature of the investigation, like you play through it once and then you get better at it. Having that kind of starting, you appreciate the DLC more having beaten the first game in that initial investigation rather than doing all of the content in your first playthrough essentially.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think pacing is another part of it.
Right.
Because, as I said, this is a sizable DLC, right? And if we're to believe howlongtobeat.com,
yes.
If the DLC takes about 10 hours and the base game takes about 20 hours, that's like a third of the playtime in the DLC.
Oh, yeah.
And where the base game very much pushes this idea of exploring the entire solar system and jumping from planet to planet to help unravel the mysteries. The DLC is kind of like, this is the area that you're exploring. It's smaller in scope than the base game,
right.
because they would have had to just make an entire new game, right? If they were trying to do something in the same scope of the base game. So yeah, it had to be smaller in scope for it to work as a DLC. But because of that, right, if you just kind of jump into the DLC halfway through your playthrough, right, and then are doing kind of most of the DLC stuff and following those lines, you're going to be in there for so long.
Yeah.
And doing that for so long. And I wonder if that would hurt the pacing of the overall game.
Yeah.
And feel very distinct, which is why I think it works as like a play Outer Wilds, beat it, and then play the DLC. It works great in that regard. And I don't know. I don't know how it might affect stuff.
I guess it's too early to say, really.
Yeah.
Okay.
My guess is it probably won't be seen as a Sonic and Knuckles sort of thing. I think most people will always distinguish the base game from the DLC. I like games that trust players.
Yes.
I like games that make me feel smart. And I haven't talked about it too much here because as I said at the start, like, the less you really know about Outer Wilds and Echoes of the Eye, the better. I think the base game and really the DLC, kind of especially, they put out a lot of questions about, like, life, the human condition, and various things alongside that, while then also giving you lots of space for reflection through, you know, you flying around space and having these calm, peaceful moments to think. And yeah, it's just so thought-provoking, and I find myself getting very attached to the world and characters and things that you encounter in the game, base and DLC, because, like, not just that it is challenging my brain in a unique way, based on, like, the mechanics and puzzles, but also, like, the ideas it's putting forward, that can be shockingly deep. So yeah, I think, and I don't want to get too much into it. It explores the theme of, you know,
yeah, of course,
whatever. But I think it explores certain themes really well, in ways that I find myself, like, fondly thinking about constantly.
...2021 in games. Has it been a decent year for games, or has it just been a bit lacking? You know, what's been your thought on it?
I thought it was a really good year for games, and it's kind of strange that I've heard several people have the sentiment that this was maybe more of a down year, and I don't feel that way at all. Possibly because I put less kind of faith in the big AAA releases, and so how good those were or weren't doesn't really affect my reading of the year. But, like, last year I felt was pretty dry in terms of games that, like, really personally affected me. And this year I felt was just full of really, really good, interesting experiments. I think the kind of advent of Game Pass has done a really good job of putting those indies in front of more people's eyes than would normally get it. You know, games like XO1 that just came out, I think would probably have a hard time finding a platform otherwise, because it's, like, a pretty short game, and it's, you know, I have no idea how much they would charge for it, or something like The Artful Escape or whatever. But because games are in some ways more accessible than they've ever been, I feel like we're all playing more of these interesting experiments, and for me, a lot of them really landed. Like, there were just a lot of hits this year.
I think Game Pass is the single most important thing we have in the industry right now, both as a consumer and as a developer, because it, like, Microsoft obviously being the richest company, can financially secure all of these developers. I've got a friend, I don't know, I can't really say what game or who he is, but he worked on a game that came out on Game Pass, and they gave him over $1 million to, you know, finish the game that was, like, halfway done already, and no time limit to get it out. So it's a lot less stressful on developers, which means they're getting this money and this nice release schedule, and then we as players pay not much money at all to play all these games. I think if it was any other company than Microsoft, I would be wary of it. But they have so, like, they are the second richest company in the world, I think. They're, like, worth like $1.5 trillion. I think if it was anyone else, it would be like, okay, things are going to get more expensive. But with them, I don't think it's going to happen. They're too focused on market share over profits to really worry about how much they're charging for their service.
Part of me feels bad saying that I'm really in on Game Pass, because, you know, it's a video game rental system, and video game ownership is kind of a worrying trend. Hell, our own the concept of ownership over our entertainment media is getting more and more tenuous and in the hands of companies, and that makes me very, very cagey for preservation and longevity and modding and so on and so forth. But for convenience, yeah, it's unbeatable, but that convenience is probably going to come with a price at some point. I think it will be at the cost of the consumer and they won't know it. But I also do kind of like it. I like the convenience. I like that there is a steady stream of stuff that I might never buy, but get to experiment with, get to toy with, in like, you know, just here and there on a Saturday afternoon. Just let's give this a crack.
I don't mean for this to become the total Game Pass, like, yeah, you know.
No, that's absolutely fine.
But it's like, it really is like, there's a lot of games that are releasing on their day one now, and that is kind of my thing. Like, you know, I've become like, you know, remarkably, disappointingly passive in my my kind of media discovery process. Like, I think we were all the same when, you know, we were like teenagers or whatever and kind of getting into this stuff. Like, we'd ravenously seek all this stuff out, but now it's kind of, whether it's music or games or whatever, it's kind of, you know, like, okay, I go to the algorithmically generated list of what's coming out and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But like, Game Pass for me was, you know, because so much stuff is like, it's releasing on Game Pass. It's, you know, I mean, like, one of the interesting things is that I'm opening, when I open up my PC now, I'm much more likely to open up the Xbox app than I am Steam now, which is kind of different from what it was previously. Like, I kind of feel, you know, I've lived through enough Steam sales to kind of have everything that, you know, I kind of want from them. And like, so, you know, Xbox is the kind of thing that's like updating with like recently added, you know, every other week or whatever. And so yeah, that's kind of how I keep up with releases nowadays, I guess. Like, you know, it's, I don't know, in this line of work, it's kind of hard to like avoid, you know, people talking about like what's coming out and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, like I say, it's a remarkably passive process nowadays, but it's you know, it is very much like, you know, it still feels like, even with that kind of passivity, it feels like I'm still kind of just automatically immersed in, you know, the kind of machinery of all this stuff that, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a danger with that it kind of turns these, you know, kind of pieces of these artworks or whatever you want to get, like, kind of like, you know, like lofty about it or whatever. Like, it's it kind of turns them into like they have their moment in the sun or whatever, and like that moment is getting smaller and smaller by the day, because it's just because, you know, because it is much more of a kind of try and see approach now. Like, you don't have that kind of initial investment like up front. You are much more likely, like, even if you have a positive experience with it, you're much more likely to just kind of put it to the side and move on. Which, you know, like, you know, things like Psychonauts 2, that's a game that I have kind of spent months like working my way through, and it's kind of felt like much more special as a result of that, you know, because it managed to kind of like subvert that thing of like, okay, this is a really good game, but, you know, I it's hard for me to get like super invested in it because, like, you know, because I didn't have that kind of, almost because I'm not like looking to like get a return on my initial investment or something like that. Yeah, it's a weird like world we're kind of moving into with all that stuff.
I don't know, like 2021 has also been weird because I was talking about it recently. I think it's been a good year for like under the radar releases, like more indie titles and stuff. Like, one trend I've really noticed is that the Twitter game dev sphere has been kind of popping off this whole year because of things like the pandemic still ongoing.
Yeah.
It's pushed development back so that we might not see these games for like another year or two. But on Twitter, they've allowed themselves to kind of post clips of the game that have gone viral, like that little gator game that's kind of a mashup of Breath of the Wild exploration and stuff. Or like the other, or like how I found out about Sable. It was from Gregorius, the developer, him posting it on his account and that going viral. I mean, in addition to like Japanese Breakfast making the soundtrack, it's really interesting how like this little sect of like, hey, that's a cool GIF. I kind of like the design behind this, even if you're only able to see like one mechanic or a bit of the art style, you're kind of on board from the get-go. And it's interesting because like I appreciate the work of people like Jeff Keighley this year and kind of like putting these events together that could still provide us all these cool games that wouldn't normally be squeezed into E3 or other sort of expos like what we get with like the Nintendo Directs or the PlayStation, or whatever you call those, is blanking on me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like even though those efforts are really nice to see, and like that Summer Games Expo, especially with like all the comfy titles that they managed to pack in there, is great. Like it's cool because Twitter, as rough of a place as it is, you really find these diamonds in the rough, and it's just neat to see. And then these little games get added onto like my upcoming list of like what I'm gonna want to play for the next year. I still think with like bigger releases we're gonna see a reliance on these trade shows and stuff to kind of show off what they got, but yeah, I think you're onto something with how this is going to be a venue for smaller creators to continue pushing their stuff out there. And like, I don't know, I feel like with the rise of accounts like Can You Pet the Dog and or like, oh, look how good this food looks inside Final Fantasy 15 or Breath of the Wild, like things like that, it kind of feeds into this like culture of like, oh, look at this like little thing I found that people like so much in games already, and it's just so ready to be shared. And just seeing these games that are like maybe in piecemeal given to us like over just like a GIF or something like that, like we don't really understand the full concept of it just yet, but it is cool to latch onto one little bit of it and kind of have that fuel your whole excitement for its upcoming or impending release. And yeah, I don't know, I definitely see it continuing to be a staple, at least in like the more online sort of word of mouth that we've seen. I'm glad more obscure games got to shine this year, because I don't think in any other year we would have had like a Game Awards Game of the Year rotation of like Psychonauts 2 and Ratchet and Clank paired with that of like Resident Evil 8, which even then, like, aside from when Resident Evil 2 Remake was nominated back for 2019's Game Awards, like, I don't think we really see horror games earn that spotlight that often. You know, like, maybe next year with the Dead Space remake, if it's good enough, it'll be, like, up for that. But even then, like, I don't think remakes should be applicable for that same sort of category, you know? But yeah, it's just weird. Like, this year has had, like, I mean, the Game Awards don't really mean anything. Like, you could still have your own Game of the Year, and, like, other outlets will have their Game of the Years. But, like, it's just interesting to see that, like, recognized in this more, like, normie mainstream sense of, like, what we're used to with, like, video game discourse. These games that are, like, clearly doing something cool are finally being recognized for that. And I just think that's so cool.
I think the games industry is in a very painful spot right now, in two ways. The first, which is what I immediately thought of, is just like so many scandals about the Old Boys Club and, you know, like Activision Blizzard and, you know, all that stuff, right? Like, so, like, I think that like, when I think about news around gaming, you know, I think about Crunch, and I think about, you know, these, like, just terrible stories of sexual harassment in the workplace and things like that. And I think That's something that the gaming industry is just going to have to keep wrestling with. Like, I don't think these questions and stuff are solved or anything, by the company tweeting out like, we support LGBTQ people or whatever, right? Like that doesn't solve the problems that plague the gaming industry. So that's kind of the first bubble of like, I don't feel like games are like in a great spot. My second bubble is I think that I think AAA kind of like big budget backed games right now are really in like a terrible place. I think that way too many are trying to get on like the easy, what I'd call like the easy money train. And I'm just talking from someone who enjoys good quality games. I think there's way too much of a push to like add in like a battle pass. It's very worrisome that it feels like just more and more games are not content with just like releasing a really good game that just comes out and is just really good. They have to try to be like the game that you're going to play from now until the end of your life. And you know what? There aren't very many games like that are good.
Now, there's a lot of cynicism about like the gaming industry, and there always has been. This is an entirely personal note, and it's something that, it's a video I watched recently, and I'm not going to name it because I don't want to draw controversy to your channel, but it's another gaming is dying video. And it was made by a guy in his early 20s, like 23. And it was this whole very misinformed, naive, doomerish rant about like how, gaming is dying and gaming is doing this and that. It's all the characters are diverse and whatever, and it's like, all the games are cinematic and boring, and it's like... And then he got to a point where it's like, and I don't even care about indies because they're all walking simulators and 2D platformers, and I was just kind of struck by the overwhelming naivete and just the willing cynicism of it. That I think is a big problem with a lot of people is... I think a lot of people want to think things are getting worse just so they can say things were better in the past. And I don't know where that comes from. I feel that's an entirely pointless conundrum they put themselves in. And I think it's really silly because there are more games coming out now than ever. And if you look, you'll find it. You mentioned Panama. That's an indie game. That is not a walking simulator or a 2D platformer. That is a send up to 90s Sims. And it's weird and it's janky. And the jokes are really kind of strange and out there. And I think what people consider the archetypal, sad, walking sim would never have jokes as fucking crazy as Brigand does, or lines of dialogue and characters. And that's kind of the point of it, is I think any cynicism about, there aren't interesting games coming out today comes from a place of not even bothering to do the slightest bit of research or look into what your options are. I think games are better than they've ever been. And you don't have to go to the AAA for it. You don't have to go to the big companies for it. It will be there for you. Or something that will surprise you.
What's funny is I usually... It's tough for me to catalog a year in games as good or bad right off the bat.
Sure.
Because sometimes there will be things that nobody played. Like, it came out that year, nobody really played it. And then, a few years later, everybody's like, oh, this was a great game that came out in 2021. Why weren't we talking about it then? So I think sometimes there's a long tail on determining whether a year in particular is good or bad. That being said, I think it was a fine year. I mean, some games that came out, one of the games that came out this year that I really loved and probably could have been on my game of the year list had it landed a little bit better was Deathloop, which kind of carries the same themes, similar themes as Death's Door. Is like, yeah, it's the living forever is not great. We gotta, there's got to be an end to things.
Of course.
Because Deathloop, it's one of those, and Deathloop I loved. I wish it had a little bit more of the arcane stuff in it, and I don't know if I have to get too specific. It's like that arcane, the things that make arcane games. I wish it had a little bit more.
I guess I found it interesting. Like, I kind of anticipated like, you know, there was a lot of people that were, you know, thinking that, okay, you know, we had the pandemic in 2020, and that, like, you know, that resulted in a bunch of delays and things getting moved back. And like, in my kind of Game of the Year video, kind of at the end of last year, I was thinking, I kind of mentioned that, like, I don't think we've seen the worst of this kind of stuff yet. And I kind of still don't think we have. I think there's definitely going to be some. I mean, there's you know, there's a lot of high profile releases coming out, especially early next year. But I still think there's going to be some ramifications of, like, you know, everyone shifting to kind of hastily put together work from home setups and the like, and all that stuff. But I think despite all that, like, you know, I started the year, and I do this thing, like, because I do my own kind of Game of the Year thing, and I don't want to forget anything, I kind of, like, note down everything I play just so I don't forget. And there was a point at the start of this year where I was thinking, man, I'm really going to be struggling for things to talk about come the end of the year. But, like, you know, now I actually get to the end of the year, and there's a ton, like, my list is huge. And I think a lot of that is down to Game Pass. Like I say, you know, it's the idea that, like, I was just able to sample way more games than I would have done previously, and a lot of those games ended up sticking and becoming kind of real favorites. So it's you know, like, stop me if you've heard this one before. It's a weird time for the games industry, you know. It's,
sure.
Where, you know, it's kind of simultaneously, like, no one really knows what's going to happen. It still kind of feels like we're still working our way into the next generation, as opposed to having been in it for the last year now. It's so, like, I don't know. It's but at the same time, there are still, like, really good games coming out. They just might not be the kind of huge AAA releases right now that that you might expect. So yeah, I'm optimistic, even though I think that, you know, there's still going to be some turbulence along the way.
I guess then, just to kind of cap things off, is there anything you're looking forward to next year?
Oh yeah, I feel like I'm gonna spend probably the first half of the year just playing Elden Ring.
Elden Ring's
probably going to be fun.
I mean, it's, Elden Ring, is that a surprise to anyone? No, I mean, so actually that was an interesting one because I saw the trailers for that, and I was feeling that kind of fatigue of, oh god, another Souls game or whatever, and then I played that network test, and I was like, okay, I'm fully in on this. It was really the subtle ways in which you could see they had to, like, alter the kind of Souls framework to accommodate an open world. Like, when you say open world Souls game, on its own, that doesn't seem like a kind of big, you know, shift towards anything in particular, but it's like they have inspired a kind of Breath of the Wild-esque kind of poking and prodding at the environment to, like, there's certain things that there's certain, like, entire dungeons that, in the network test at least, like, you could only access by doing a certain double jump from, you know, a very certain point or whatever. There's more, like, frequent checkpoints and stuff. All these tiny little changes that have been made in, like, previous Souls games, and, like, if prior Souls games have taught me anything, it's that with that formula, it is the smallest changes that will make the most drastic overall impacts and stuff in terms of, like, healing items and everything. And I don't know, I played this one, and it felt like all those changes were being made in the right way, I suppose. It's you know, it really felt like a lot of thought had gone into, like, okay, we need to, like, drastically change this formula, or, like, not even drastically, like, just a lot of really subtle changes that we need to make to this mechanical formula in order to accommodate the grander vision of what we're trying to achieve. And you could see that in every aspect of the network test. Like, even things like horse combat, you know, it's such a, like, simple thing when you think about it, but it's like the way they've managed, like, animations and the like, it kind of feels more like it's about as close as I can think of to actual jousting in a video game, which is like really like it's a really weird thing. But they've managed to make horse combat like meaningful as like as an alternative, you know. So it's there's so much going on there that is very, very exciting. Like in terms of, you know, I was like very fatigued on. Or I thought I was fatigued on the kind of Souls formula because I've played all of them, and you know they're this, you know, they're all weighty action games and stuff that are, you know, difficult or whatever. But then I played this one and I was like, yeah, okay, I'm very, very excited for this.
They've pulled you back in.
Yes.
I have so much I'm looking forward to next year, but it could also be like I'm looking forward to these in 2023 because like the development, as I mentioned, is like still so up in the air of so many titles. But like, at least from what we have confirmed, Bayonetta 3 is probably the top of my list, just because I want to see if like Platinum could finally reach those heights that they showed so early in their career with like Vanquish, Bayonetta 1, Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, stuff like that again. Like, I want to see if Bayonetta 3 will be more like 2, where it's a little like looser focused on the combat, or if it'll, you know, finally like signal a relative like coming back of Platinum's like hardcore ethos. But we'll have to see. The Dead Space remake as well is going to be interesting because like from what they've shown so far in the very early builds of it, it does look like they actually understand what made the original tick. It was something I was very much like, why is this happening when it was first confirmed, because the game's not even that old and it looks, you know, really good still. But I don't know, I'm interested to see how it turn out, and especially if they fix the tutorialization at the start where it's just like, oh, shoot the limbs, we're gonna tell you 4 more times after this. Like, I wonder I wonder how they're gonna handle that, especially like with considerations for like accessibility and like modern design approaches, you know.
I think we're going to see a giant influx of NFTs in the AAA space for maybe a year, 2 years. Watch this space, and it will just come crashing down. It'll be gone. And a lot of companies are going to lose money, and we will see the death of a bunch of franchises that we love because of this experiment with NFTs. That is my big prediction.
Probably blatantly obvious, but Breath of the Wild 2 is gonna be my only answer. I cannot wait to see what that game does. That's gonna be a hell of a time.
Breath of the Wild 2, baby. Yeah, I guess Breath of the Wild 2 is probably the big one.
Yeah.
I'm very curious. I'm trying to keep my expectations low for that as well. But yeah, I mean, I think it looks interesting, and I hope they expand on the design philosophies of Breath of the Wild.
I might save up and get a Quest 2 if those rumors about disconnecting from Facebook are true, because cordless VR is very interesting to me.
Yeah.
Bomb Rush Cyberpunk? About that?
That's fine. Yeah, you can look forward to that.
Yeah. Sifu, which not really looked too much more into it, but that looked like an interesting fighting game. You know, I like my brawlers, I like my fighting games, I like my beat 'em ups.
Oh, there's that game, Sifu,
oh yeah,
the one that actually moved its release date forward so that it didn't have to compete with Elden Ring. That looks really cool. I mean, I'm a big fan of that kind of like, you know, Wing Chun style of action or whatever, and so yeah, that looks really neat to me. So yeah.
You know, I don't have many big ones. My biggest, like my most anticipated game comes out pretty early in the year, which is Sifu, that the kind of like the martial arts one where you get older when you die or whatever. I love martial arts movies. I really wanted to get into Absolver, but because of that game's kind of multiplayer focus, I never really was interested, and so I am super psyched for Sifu. Obviously, Elden Ring and whatever is also very, very exciting. But I'm the games that I always end up liking most at the end of the year are games that I didn't even know were going to be released that year. So I'm keeping my options open.